begin with roll call.
Rob Keller.
Here.
Sue Wilson.
Here.
Don Kramer.
Here.
Lee Metzger.
Here.
Here.
We'll be here in a little bit. Next is our good news with Mr. Sato.
Okay, I'll just kind of go through kind of quickly here as Mr. Coffey scrolls through some things too. I had the Delve project, some pictures from that. That's an annual social studies project where kids delve deeply into a topic and do presentations. There's some pictures there at the beginning of a mural project at Laura Ingalls Wilder with some students, and then the finished product is in there later too. They actually did several murals. We have the Indianola Lions Club recognizing third quarter middle school Pride Plus Award recipients. An update on Hank Gorder. He was a sixth grade student who attended state math counts. There's a little article on Jen Dowler, one of our special education teachers, who's created an online class that is one of the top 5 facilitated professional development courses in the state. Some pictures there from the life skills class. They decided to make birthday cake kits for a Giving Back project this year, and they were able to do 30 kits. There's a picture of the MAD dance court there. That's music, art, and drama. They were excited to be able to have that this year after a couple of years off with COVID. There's a little article, an update there on high school band and their annual solo and small ensemble contest and the results. There's the pictures of the murals that I referenced. A few pictures of sixth grade field trip to the Civic Center earlier this month. And then an update on the conference art show and some pictures there. That's it today. Thanks, Art.
Okay. Any delegations?
He's got a list of speakers. Okay.
Deb Shea Larson.
Hello, I'm Deb Shea Larson. On Sunday, March 20th, 2022, over 3 weeks ago, I sent an email to all the board members and Dr. Sadoff. And Dr. Sadoff replied with acknowledgement and thank you for that. But I haven't heard from any other board member, and I was really disappointed. So I'm here to read it publicly this evening. Dear Dr. Sadoff and members of the Indianola School Board, thank you for your hard work. Congratulations to both Art Sadoff and Ted Inns. As agreed last year, prior to the November elections, we believe it is now time to continue the discussion regarding whether to remove or keep the Indianola Indians. We would like to suggest that a planning committee be formed now that would report to the superintendent and school board consisting of interested school board members, students, and community members who equally represent all sides of the discussion. Here are the proposed committee goals. 1, information needed. Clarify the information that the school board and the community would like to review in this discussion and identify where to obtain it. 2, topics and speakers. Identify proposed topics and speakers for the forums, including individuals outside our community and our state. 3, schedule. Propose dates and times for the forums, with the first one prior to the end of the current 2021-2022 school year to prioritize our student participation. 4, location. Establish a location for the forums that could include virtual presentations, since some speakers will not be able to travel. Moderator, number 5. Invite a moderator for the forums who would work to maintain a welcoming and safe space for the discussions. 6, decision-making framework. Establish the criteria together to be used for decision-making regarding whether to remove or keep the Indianola Indians. That includes the Indianola School District's vision, mission, and beliefs as follows. Vision. Proud traditions, unlimited possibilities. Mission. Indianola Community School District is committed to excellence and achieving a lifetime of success. And our beliefs. We will put students first. We will meet the needs of all students so that they can learn at high levels and be prepared for next steps along the way. We'll provide safe and supportive schools. We'll be fiscally responsible and thoughtful about resource allocation, and our actions will reflect our beliefs. And then I added, I'd like to personally volunteer and participate in this planning committee. Thank you for your consideration. Deb Shea Larson. So as background, in the summer of 2020, our group was successful in working with the city of Indianola to finally remove the Indianola Indians from the city's police department. At that time, we turned to the Indianola School District next for discussion, and President Keller asked us to wait so the school board could prioritize issues with the COVID-19 pandemic. That was understandable, and we waited. But about 8 months later, during the pandemic, in the spring of 2021, we read in the news about President Keller's ongoing work with the Native American Guardians Association, or NAGA, and the school board work session that included a virtual presentation and discussion with NAGA. NAGA is a group, interestingly, that's outside Indianola and outside our state, so that's why we would include that as well in the planning committee. So since the Indianola School Board was already working on the Indianola Indians, we came back and in the summer of 2021, President Keller asked us to wait again through the election in November of 2021. Recently, and at that point, in the public discussion with the Indianola Indians with you was also denied again. Recently, over the past few months, we voluntarily respected Dr. Sadov's retirement announcement. Congratulations. And your work to search for and appoint Ted Inns as the new superintendent. President Keller, it's our understanding that the Indianola School Board members have been directed to not respond to questions regarding the Indianola Indians. And if that's true, why? Do you and the new superintendent want to be part of this Indians discussion when Mr. Inns is here in July of 2022? And if that's the case, then why not simply say it? Why the silence? In July of 2022, we will have waited 2 years for public discussion and cooperation with you. The email I sent to you and read publicly here this evening includes our expectations for this public discussion, beginning with the planning committee, and that appears reasonable. We're looking forward to working with you and a response. Thank you for your consideration.
Next. David Alexander.
Guess you guys are going to see how well I did in speech class here several years ago. My name's David Alexander. First, thank you for the courage and leadership I saw during the COVID. I commend you guys on how well you handled that. I'm here tonight to talk about some books that we have in our school libraries and also our curriculum. Not accusing anyone here. Somewhere, somehow, they got into our libraries, and they are pretty, from what I've seen, pornographic by all definition. Not subjectively, objectively, they have pornographic material. It's been said, pornographic, somewhere somebody said that these are artistic literature that promote tolerance and help children. I couldn't differ more. I think it does the opposite. I think it destroys our compassion for each other. We see people as objects, sex toys for pleasure. It's not a recreational thing, sex. Shouldn't ever be seen as recreational. It also overpowers individuals in a lot of these books. Now, I know there's the argument that you can't just take a few pages, you gotta look at the overall book. But I would like to remind everyone here that we are going to go out and ask for $100 million plus to put up a new school. And we want to go out there to the public and say, you know, we need $100 million to add to our school. And they're going to ask, well, what are we getting out of our $100 million? And we don't want it. We don't want this as our reputation. And as an analogy to that, we build this school and everybody says, it's beautiful. I like the overall content of the school, but it's got one thing that might kill somebody. Are we going to design that out? Are we going to live with that danger? I mean, if anybody thinks that this is not pornography, and I got the definition, if anyone wants to read it, if anyone is for pornography, is some sort of way to help people, I got it right here. You read this. Tell me how this helps children. I don't even think adults can handle this stuff. Anyway, I would like to see this cleared up, and there's got to be, my wife has came up with an outside source that can objectively identify pornography and rate some of these. I get it, there's some that are gray areas that we may need. I don't want to get rid of all our books. I just want to get the harmful ones that we know are harmful, regardless of how overall the book is. If the book was that good, we tear out those pages and let the kids get something out of it. But there's no quantifiable data when people say, well, the overall book is good. All of these few pages, you can't judge it by. Show me your data that this book took these kids and they improved to here. I don't see that data. And I don't think anybody could produce that in a court of law if something happens to one of our kids. Can't we get back to reading C.S. Lewis and feed our brains with good literature? Do we have to go to the gutter and read this stuff? Thank you.
Patty Alexander.
If I think
Pass those
that's,
around.
yeah, do you mind? Do you want to pass them around?
That's her.
There should be enough, yeah. There's more.
If they need more. Okay.
Hello, my name is Patty Alexander, and we are here because we care deeply for our children, families, community, teachers, and schools. We have a legitimate concern about the sexually explicit materials being found in our school library and possibly the classrooms. We are asking you, our community leaders and school board, to place safeguards on these media and materials. We have GoGuardian on the Chromebooks. We have parental approval for our children's use of those Chromebooks, and we give parental approval for the use of our students' personal data. It would be easy to add a parental approval for the illicit books. We aren't here to ban books. I want to say that again. We're not here to ban books. We are here to put a filter on these books. We are telling you that we want to be informed parents, and we want to know what our children are reading. We want to be able to guide our children to be contributing members of society. We want to be able to preserve the innocence of our children. Many of us have moved to Indianola because we felt that we could make that happen and provide our kids with the childhood they deserve. Bottom line, the materials are being found in our public school library. That makes it difficult to be those good parents that we want to be. We provided a few excerpts from the books in our beloved Indianola schools as examples for you. We refuse to share the titles or read them out loud. Read these out loud because, number one, they're just too disgusting, vulgar, sexually descriptive, filthy, and essentially illegal in public. We want pornographic books taken out of our schools. In other words, these materials do not meet the standards of our community. Nor did these materials have literary merit. We are all very aware that it's a problem. And here's a common sense solution. It's inexpensive, easily standardized. The problem can be fixed today. As you can see from the samples, and I hope everybody got one. I printed off, I think, 11. As you can see from the samples, it's a rating system, and it's a 5-tier rating system, essentially equivalent to the movie ratings. In other words, this system is a way for us to build a common language that would inform parents and help educators to communicate the contents of the texts. This rubric is an objective tool and is commonly understood. To explain briefly, a 0 rating for materials means that it contains some impolite conversations, some mild and non-explicit violence, but there is no nudity, no profanity, no reference to sexual activities, and no drug or sexual or alcohol abuse. A 5 rating, conversely, contains explicit references to aberrant sexual activities, drug, sex, and alcohol abuse. The rating rubric is provided by a nonprofit organization made up of a group of parents throughout the nation called the YouthAdvisoryRating.org. It would be easy to put together a task force made up of community members, teachers, and administrators to work through the literature. However, most of the work has already been done for us, by the Youth Advisory Group. In conclusion, here's what we need to do. Number one, let's just take the number 5 rating books out of our schools. They are X-rated, and they were not intended for teenagers or children. Number 2, put a parental approval or parental consent to access the level 4 explicit sexual materials. Add this to the checkoffs during the registration time online. And number 3, let's choose a better publishing company to purchase literature from. Let's put a policy in place to preserve the innocence of our children and support family and community values. Let's be proactive, continue to work together as educators and a community for what's best for our children and humanity. Let's be leaders and implement this simple win-win solution and move on. Thank you for your shared concerns, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening.
Kyle Burke.
Hey everybody, hope you're doing well this evening. Greta and I wanted to take a little time to articulate our points on our decision to not open the contract in regards to the teacher's salary supplement funds for the retention bonuses and coupling that with associate pay scale. So here's a letter that we issued to IEA members last week. Dear IEA members, as you are aware, IEA recently requested that the district use ESSER, ARPA, and reserve funds to award $1,000 bonuses to educators who were excluded from the governor's mandate, namely counselors, librarians, instructional coaches, and associates. The district responded by requesting that IEA reopen the master contract to negotiate the use of teacher salary supplement funds to pay $1,000 bonuses to certified staff. The district would like us to use the 5% of TSS funds held in reserve for these bonuses. These funds are held in reserve in the event that new staff is hired during the school year, and the contract stipulates that all remaining reserve funds are paid out of the teachers in the May paycheck, the TSS adjustment. For context, the average of the TSS adjustment over the past 5 years is $452.60. In short, all teachers would give up this adjustment, including the 36 certified staff originally excluded, in order to give those 36 teachers a $1,000 retention bonus. Recently, the state amended House File 2575 to allow school districts to utilize the unspent funds for the purpose of paying these bonuses. And in there we quote Division 9 School District's Teacher Bonuses, Section 25, new Section 279.76 Teacher Bonuses. 1. On or before June 30th, 2022, a school district may use an unexpended and unobligated monies in the school district's general fund to pay a bonus not to exceed $1,000 to each individual employed by the school district who did not receive a $1,000 retention bonus payment for the calendar year 2022 through the Department of Education. In addition, the district has tacked on a request to reopen the contract for the purpose of negotiating Salary B, the associate salary schedule. We agreed to reopen just last year for this very same purpose, at which the district offered a $1 an hour increase. Giving associates who work 37.5 hours per week a $1,000 bonus is the equivalent of giving a 75-cent an hour raise. We believe that this is a good way to address associate retention while still upholding the integrity of the bargaining agreement. In addition, the entire master contract expires next year and will be renegotiated, including Schedule B. Most importantly, the best way for the district to attract and retain associates is to offer all associates full-time hours and benefits. Reopening the contract in order to bargain specific parts of it, while sometimes necessary, is not best practice. Furthermore, the district has the ability to award the bonuses for which we advocated without reopening the contract and taking from TSS funds. The district also has the power to increase associate hours and offer benefits without bargaining. It lies solely in their discretion to do so. For these reasons, we are denying their request to reopen the master contract and will continue to advocate for using ESSER, ARAP funds, and unspent reserve funds to pay these bonuses. We have requested that the district separate their request to increase associate pay from their request to use TSS funds for bonuses. If they are willing to do so, we will consider reopening the contract.
Greta Southall, Chief Negotiator. I will try not to be too repetitive. As Kyle mentioned, our job in the Indianola Education Association is to advocate for teachers and associates. And recently we requested that the district use unspent funds to extend bonuses to those who are excluded, including our associates. At the last board meeting, 2 separate committee reports indicated that the board was highly interested in showing their appreciation to the educators who were left out by the state. It very much seemed like IEA and the school board were advocating for the same thing. We were disappointed to learn that the district was willing to extend these bonuses, but wanted to do so by taking teacher salary supplement money away from teachers, some of whom they would then turn around and give it back in the form of a bonus. Asking teachers to pay for the bonuses of those excluded is hardly a demonstration of appreciation. If teachers wanted to pay bonuses to their colleagues who were left out, we could set up a GoFundMe account. At least then it would be voluntary and in our own terms. On behalf of our excluded peers, we asked the district to use AR, PA, ESSER, or reserve funds to include them. If the district doesn't want to use those funds to extend the bonuses, fine, the board should say so. However, this is not what the board chose to do. Instead, we publicly expressed support for the bonuses and then proceeded to place not only the responsibility of making the decision about whether or not to give the bonuses, but also the burden for paying them on the teachers. To further complicate the issue, the board coupled their legal request to reopen the contract for the purpose of taking TSS funds to pay bonuses with a request to improve associate pay. This is very convenient for the board. It creates the appearance of wanting to do right by their employees, but places the IEA in a lose-lose situation. The board gets to say, we wanted to, but, while the association has to make the hard decision of denying the request. We are frustrated by the position in which we have been thrust and the lack of response to the board to our willingness to separate the 2 items. Furthermore, the power and the ability to extend retention bonuses and improve associate compensation lies fully in the hands of the district. No negotiation is necessary. It can be done in 2 ways. 1, choose to use the funds available to you that are not already designated for teachers to extend the bonuses. 2, allow associates to work full-time hours and give them benefits. You can do one or both of these things. The master contract does not restrict you from doing so. It is entirely up to this body. Thank you.
Diana Mills.
Hello, I'll try to be short and sweet here. There's a lot of us. My name is Diana Mills. I have 2 daughters in the district. My 12-year-old daughter was recently explaining a book to me that she had just finished reading here at school. As she explained, she stopped at a certain part and she said, well, there's a part where the main character went to a party and it's kind of shady. The book she read is called Lush, and I looked up to see what she was talking about. It turns out, at this part in the book, a 16-year-old was trying to have sex with a 13-year-old girl. As a mother, I was pretty upset, but I had no idea what my child was reading here at school. You could say, big deal, so what? This book talks about a minor trying to have sex with a 13-year-old girl. For me, it's inappropriate for my child, and it did not need to be pushed into her mind at 12 years old. The issue is that there's all kinds of materials like this in the school library. They're obscene and they're pornographic. So what's next? What does my child read next without my knowledge? It is my duty as a mother to protect and restrain inappropriate material from my children. We are deteriorating as a society in a moral sense. There is an insistent push to sexualize our children. We are allowing all kinds of corruption to cross lines because of fear of offending someone. We can do better for our children and our children's children, and I thank you for your time and attention on this matter.
Amy Shivers.
Hello. Historically school, you want me to introduce myself? Amy Shivers, I have 5 kids. I have recently taken 2 of my kids out, one for medical issues and the other for a lot of these social distractions, I will call them. Historically, schools and teachers have been a safe, welcoming place for our children. We send our children to school for an education, to learn basic skills and information, to usher them into adulthood where they'll naturally have more freedom and choice to dive deeper into any subject matter that interests them. I send my kids to school to learn math, science, history, and language arts. Given the group setting this takes place in, they should probably also be learning how to interact well with peers and some critical thinking through teacher-facilitated conversations. All of this is great and only aids students to become more successful adults. Recently, I seem to be sending my children into a place that not only teaches those basic skills, but also allowing and even creating an environment that has them questioning sexuality. I know schools have always taught some basic health essentials, the facts, like how male and female reproductive organs function, and for our younger boys and girls, about their bodies going through puberty. I remember learning these things myself. What I don't remember is what any of my teachers' sexual preferences were, their thoughts about sexuality, or even if they were married. They were my teachers, and they came to school every day to present us with facts. The role seems to have changed. We have strayed from presenting the facts to allowing, approving, even going as far as to promoting various ways of sexuality. With many of the books that have been brought to our attention, my question is simply why? Why do we have these over-sexualized content accessible to students? Why have these made it to the shelves for students to go through? Why is this being allowed in our children's schools? It has nothing to do with basic fundamentals of education and offers much more graphic content than that of a free reading book. I know some would disagree about these being promoted, with the argument being, well, they have access to that on their phone that you're paying for. While I can appreciate the argument, as a parent, I monitor my children's devices and have boundaries and expectations set. If I were to find any X-rated content on any of my children's phones, there would be, at very minimal, a conversation taking place. Yet, when a trusted adult in the education setting hands a child said book, they have then given them the permission to take in this, in some cases, pornographic content. Parents are being left in the dark when it comes to content and exposure at school. As parents, teachers, and administrators, we've got to do a better job of filtering materials for our young minds that we have been entrusted with. We need to start to work toward getting the focus back to the basics. There is a time and place for people to explore more mature subject matters of personal interest, and I do not feel that it is appropriate for it to be in the public education system. We have already put so much, We already have so much we want and expect from our students that they're feeling that pressure. Exposing them to unnecessary and, in my opinion, inappropriate content, this only creates more distraction and confusion in their already very burdened minds. I'd love to see our kids experience being kids and leave them more mature ideas for their adult lives. They're only going to be young for such a short time, and it seems that the culture push is to rob them of even more of that precious time.
I wasn't going to speak. If it's Carla. Carla, I'm sorry. Okay, you don't want to speak? No. Okay. Amanda Kaufman.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Kaufman. My husband Aaron and I have 4 children in the district, 1 in middle school, 2 in elementary, and 1 still at home. We know over the past several months here and around the country, parents have been showing increased concern with materials available to our children at school, both in the school library and in the classroom. I would like to believe that most of us are also aware that this, like most issues today, has been highly politicized and made into a left-right issue. Before sharing our experience, I'd just like to be clear that the safety of children is and never should be politicized. I'd also like to be clear in that while I do believe children should not have access in school to materials that are not age appropriate, I do not believe that censorship is the answer. Most of the discussions that I've been hearing are happening around high school libraries. I would like to share 2 examples of our family's own experiences, one in the elementary school and one in the middle school level. When our son was in 3rd grade, he was assigned a book called 3 Times Lucky. He started it at school and stopped on page 7 because he came to some words that we do not allow in our home. I then read the book, which was a fun and interesting murder mystery. There were several instances in the book where children and adults were threatened with guns, examples of domestic violence, alcoholism, murder, and a particularly fun conversation between 2 6th grade students discussing whether or not an adult woman's boobs were real or not. My son was 8 years old when this was assigned to him. The recommended age for this book is 12 years and older, and we expressed our concern to the teacher and the principal. Our son was given an alternate assignment while the rest of the class finished the book. Just this past week, our 6th grader came home with a list of terms that he didn't understand from a group of videos that he had been given in class. Included in the list of terms that he heard in these videos and didn't understand were the gay plague, medicinal marijuana, gay bars, sharps, heroin, and Narcan. In a 10-minute video titled "Addiction is a Disease, We Should Treat It Like One," the speaker spent the first 5 minutes sharing examples of his struggles with his sexuality and celebrating the progress made by the LGBT community over the past decade. I'm not sure how this connected to the subject of the talk, which was supposed to be about addiction. These were all TED Talks. TED Talks can be great. They're informative, engaging, and interesting, and very much geared toward an adult audience. There are TED Talks made for younger students called TED Ed, which use cartoons to make the content more appealing to kids. 7 of the videos my son was given were for adults. In case there's any doubt that they were made for adults, one video began with, "We all like to start our day with coffee and end with a glass of wine." I'm pretty sure that this is enough proof that they were made for adults, despite the rest of the content. I found them interesting, but I am an adult, not a 12-year-old. 4 of the videos were given to him that were from the TED Ed series, which are made specifically for younger students. One of the videos was titled, "Is Marijuana Bad for Your Brain?" This video used an adorable dancing marijuana leaf and explained that marijuana is a much less dangerous drug than other drugs, doesn't have severe withdrawal consequences, and doesn't leave any long-term effects. The narrator admitted that people may respond to the drug differently, but stressed its relative safety, citing the impossibility of overdose. The video narrator and its graphics made marijuana use appealing. The cute graphics showcased the innocence of this drug. My particular 12-year-old's main question was why the video never even mentioned the legality issue around drug use, particularly while his dad's profession as a police officer requires him to enforce the law, including drug use. Regardless of personal opinion, the question remains, why was this video given to a group of 6th graders? Among some of the other videos included discussion on medical marijuana for chemotherapy patients, which was an interesting video, but I don't understand why a 12-year-old would have any notion of what they were talking about in any way. The class was doing research on substance abuse, which is fine, they need to know that stuff. There's tons of age-appropriate materials available to teach 6th graders about this in a way they can understand. I've shared these experiences just to point out that regardless of the topics being covered, the materials need to be chosen with care to ensure the target audience is able to understand and use the information and to be able to learn and grow through it. Thanks.
Rita or Jim Fromm?
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Fromm. I am here with my lovely wife Rita. I went through Indianola High School and middle school here. I got here in '68, started in 7th grade, and thanks to a wonderful speech teacher, Jan Zitzman, I think it's Jan, Mrs. Zitzman, lovely class in that rickety old high school up the turn of the century 1800s school. Anyway, thank you for your service on the school board and your patience here with us tonight, as I think we're all concerned about different things. Many of them are common. The logo, the wages and stuff like that, we all pay for this. More than half our taxes go for the school system, and we should be getting a good say in what goes on here. And I think a lot of us have not been, like us, Rita and I, have not been aware of what's been going on until recently. In some meetings, we've kind of caught some drifts on the news and things like that. Some things that are happening that we don't feel are appropriate, and I'm here tonight mostly to talk about the books that have been allegedly provided to kids or available to kids. And I guess I literally started out with Dick and Jane books back in first grade in Hickston, Wisconsin. And I can remember reading them and the Go Spot Go and all that kind of stuff. That was my start. I was in middle school. We didn't have phones, we didn't have TV. Lived out in the country, and there was just nothing else to do but read. So I would take stacks of books home every other week when I could and read them all and bring them back and take more. And I believe that books are a very important thing for our kids to use to learn sentence structure, punctuation, word spelling, all that stuff that you guys teach, plus adventures. I mean, I traveled the world in books and learned lots of things from books. And I think they're very important, and really encourage the use of them. I love libraries. I think all kids should really get into libraries. The problem is, though, that when stuff is available in libraries that a parent wouldn't see as appropriate, there's no fence. And the curiosity, I can tell you from a young boy perspective, there is a curiosity for sexual things. And I don't think that parental supervision is going to work all the time like you'd think it would or hope it would for your child when they're going into that book that's already got a little orange mark on it or something. It's going to be more of a target than anything, I think. So, I appreciate the rating system, but I guess I'd be on the other side. There's plenty of other things that we can put in the library. We don't need things that are graphically sexual in content. Last night I spent a couple hours tossing and turning in bed. Got up this morning and looked up the Iowa Code, I think it's 728 in the chapter 728. And it goes through and very clearly describes the things that are not allowed for adults to do with kids when it comes to pornographic materials. It includes stuff like what my wife read to me on the way home last night. Just a short section from Silver something, I forget what it was, one of the books, but it's pretty damn graphic. And I said, well, maybe I should have a little contest and see if you can figure out which am I reading from Penthouse magazine or a book that's in your library. I couldn't see the difference. It's pornographic. It's not appropriate for kids, in my opinion, of any school age under 18. And in chapter 728, section 7, it basically gives the school an out that if it's used, and Mary Lee caught me this afternoon, appropriately. And I can see in a clinical section, the PE school back when I was doing it, here's talk about sex, boys, girls, whatever. There are times to talk about things, but the graphic fiction about sexual experiences, right down to all that stuff that if you want to read it, it's in there, does not, it's not legal according to chapter 728. And I think you guys should go start it at the first, going starting with the definitions, go through that, and then read again the part 7 on that actually talks about, it's basically a get out of jail free card for school officials. I don't buy that. I was really surprised when I got to that section. I'm like, but the word appropriate is there, and I don't think the stuff that we're talking about that we've got examples of are appropriate. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Oh, he said it all, that's fine. That's all I have. Are there anybody that came in late that would like to be added? There's one on the back of your page. That's That's all I have.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda.
Hi.
by Sue to approve the consent agenda, seconded by Tim. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next is a introduction by our new principal from Whittier.
Yep, we have Brooke Mendoza here tonight. She'll be our new Whittier principal next year. Thanks for hanging in there, Brooke. You know, tonight you can see some of the community topics firsthand, so.
Yes, good stuff. I wanted to come here today to introduce myself. I'm Brooke Mendoza. I wanted you to be able to put a face with the name. I am very excited to become a part of this wonderful community and school district, especially Whittier Elementary School. I'm looking forward to continue working with Mr. Johnson, who is amazing. He has been amazing in helping with beginning the transition early so that we can make it as seamless as possible. And I have had the opportunity to attend several of the events with PTO that have happened so far. I've been in the building, and I want to make sure that I continue to be in the building as much as I can and break away from my current district as much as I can, just so that at the beginning of school year next year, I am not a stranger to the students, the staff, and many of the family members. So I appreciate you welcoming me. I'm excited to start my work, and I look forward to being at many more of these board meetings.
Thank you, Brooke.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Welcome.
All right. Next on our agenda is your district is review of library materials process. So
I did not know we were going to have a lot of speakers on this topic tonight, but this kind of gives a rundown of, where we've been and what we've been doing, as well as some potential ideas for the future that Mr. Sieversma can probably help fill in some blanks on. Just a report that I put together, and I wanted to put everything out there in front of you in terms of specific books that have gone through reconsideration process, others that have been kind of informally raised that that have been considered outside of the process. We do have a couple of relevant board policies. One is on objection to instructional materials, and then there's also a board policy in there on selection of library books and some information that's been included from the middle school, high school librarian. I think somebody made the comment about the focus being on high school books. That definitely has been the case for me. Prior to tonight, I hadn't heard a concern about an elementary book before our speaker tonight. So some of this is policy. Some of this is just specifically these are things that have been raised. Then there's information on book selection, and then there's additional information. There's a little bit about some ideas that Mr. Sieversma has kicked around, which coincides somewhat with some things you heard tonight from some speakers, and then just some additional information in terms of, I guess, from a legal standpoint. You heard some of that tonight too. There's a little bit about Iowa Code and the Library Bill of Rights from the American Library Association, as well as the Supreme Court definition of obscenity there. So, I've included that. I think it's a point in time kind of document for you with some context in terms of policy. I can answer any questions Mr. Sieversma can, or we can do whatever you like with that. But more than anything, I wanted to give the board a status report, and then, very timely given the concerns raised tonight too.
all right. So we can open it up for some discussion here as board members.
This is the current construct of the Book Advisory Committee? Is that what this is?
Yes, that first policy is that's in board policy, and that's the reconsideration committee, the makeup of it. And, that's not necessarily a static committee just because of the time it takes, and if you are running books through this process. Within those books that have been through this process, we've had some change in the committee too, as people have had conflicts or were asked to be replaced. So,
Is that committee a committee that's appointed by the board or by the superintendent, or who?
Three community members are appointed by the board, and then the rest are lined out there, students and school staff.
Is that book by book?
Well, it probably depends kind of how the reconsideration challenges come. There are 3 books that have been through this process. The first one was the first committee, and then the next 2 books came together in a challenge, and that was the second committee, considered 2 of them. So I think I would recommend, I mean, if we continue to have books go through this process, I would recommend not having the same people all the time, just because of the time and the rigor of going through that process.
Will you go back where it showed the books that were removed and the ones that weren't removed, please? I think
Touching
it's-
Spirit Bear, Looking for Alaska, and
And then
Beyond
go,
Magenta.
go further down. There's another list.
Yeah, the others, I listed others, and again, I'm all about transparency. There's another, the middle of that next page, 4 titles that did not go through the reconsideration process, but there are other ways that the collection is reviewed. I use the word culled. The librarians do go through, they look at what's been checked out. In many cases, some of the books that are raised as concerns have been checked out not at all or very little, and especially if they're older books, that's easy. So those that have been removed, you can see it said removed by administration and staff. That's been a conversation between me and principals and librarian, and we look. There was one case where it was a book that was marked mature, considered mature or something. Current librarian would not have purchased it, actually hadn't been checked out. That was easy, to make a decision on.
So, I don't know how any of this works, obviously. So, can you just take me through a little bit of like how do our librarians, do they look at catalogs, read about synopsises, and then say, I want to order 6 of these? Like, how do we get new books coming into our system?
Well, I would refer you to what I included from the librarian under book selection. And there's a board policy, again, that guides this, 605.1, and then there's a regulation that goes along with that too. So in making recommendations in board policy 605.1, licensed employees are selecting materials that support the educational philosophy, goals, and objective of the school district, consider the needs, age, and maturity of the students within the school district's budget, foster respect and appreciation for cultural diversity and difference of opinion, stimulate growth in factual knowledge and literary appreciation, encourage students to become decision makers, to exercise freedom of thought, and to make independent judgment through the examination and evaluation of relevant information, evidence, and differing viewpoints, portray the variety of careers, roles, and lifestyles open to persons of both sexes, and increase in awareness of the rights, duties, responsibility of each member of a multicultural society. And then there's a regulation that accompanies that goes into a little more of the detail you asked about. The librarian follows those policies, and then she said also book titles can come from teacher requests for curriculum needs, student request, well-loved books that are worn out need to be replaced, books that are new in a popular series, popular books with many holds, books highlighted from our SLIK-12 listserv, and that there was a link included there as well, but that's from Library Journal, for example. High-interest books, observations of and conversations with students searching for, checking out books for projects, award books, Follett Tidal Wave, Follett's Destiny. So that's a little bit more about that.
How would you envision additional members rotating in, Art? Like, what's that?
I'm sorry, additional what?
When you talked about not necessarily having the same people, do you have?
Yeah, well, that would come back, the board would appoint 3 community members, and, I would I would seek out other people in the school. You know, it says, for example, an administrator. Well, there's multiple people now. The first challenge we had, I asked our director of teaching and learning to serve on that, just with the thought that even though it's not classroom curriculum, it was sort of a curriculum thing. Another challenge we had, I had a building administrator from the building on there. I have had the librarian on there because I don't think any of the books that were challenged were added to the collection in her tenure. There is a part in the policy too that says something about excusing someone who was part of the purchase. And, you know, the policy, the reconsideration is geared to not to kind of, not to blame anybody, but take an honest look at the material, you know, so that's part of that as well. So, you know, I think the minimum amount of time involved with this, you know, and this is sort of laid out in an exhibit that I don't think it's in here, but it's an accompanying directions to the committee. You know, the first night they introduce each other, they determine roles within the committee, talk about what the challenge material is, hopefully have copies of it, and then, you know, time to review the materials, and then at least one more meeting to hash it out. So there's a significant time commitment to that, and that's another reason to kind of change people out.
Patty, were all these copies that you gave us of the literature that you provided, is that all in our libraries?
Yes, it is.
I'm going to speak as a father. This is,
I read the two books that were challenged, two of them.
I guess I'm reading these.
I haven't read that. Two that were challenged. I didn't find anything that I wouldn't want to leave it in the library.
You want it?
I didn't find anything in there that I thought was objectionable enough that I wouldn't leave it in the library, especially for high school kids. I mean, I'm sorry, we're gonna, you know, I guess we can ban the internet and TikTok and R-rated movies and, you know, I don't think we have that.
We have done that in the buildings. They can't get on and watch porn on their phone in school, that's against policy.
Right, but you know what? There's all kinds of great literature out there that might have a couple lines in it that you don't agree with. That nothing's going to be perfect for any kid to read. But the story that I read, both of them were very much.
Which two did you read?
Looking for Alaska and Beyond Magenta.
So those were the ones that did get left in? Left in. Yeah. What about the others?
What about what?
Have you read any of the ones that got taken out?
None of these have been
No.
reviewed.
No, but there's a list in here on page 30,
I don't know.
36 that came out.
Yeah, I agree. Everybody's going to have different standards on things for each family, but we should be respectful of those standards for each family. It's after the fact is what bothers me, is that somebody can, we're playing defense, like when a student reads something in the third grade, now they've already been exposed to it, it's already in their mind, and if those parents didn't want that in their mind, then it's there already.
So if we're responsible for kids' behavior while within these walls, we're responsible for if substances come into these walls. I mean, we punish them and all. We have stuff that's not appropriate for them. I don't think we're doing our due diligence by not taking care of that. Like if it's in our building and they come in our building, any other time they go against a policy, right, there's consequences. So I do think that there's a problem when a third grader is learning about domestic abuse and guns and murder, and I know that as parents we can prevent that, but there are parents that don't allow that in their home and are leaving it up to the school to respect those values as well. And yes, as a parent, I have to have conversations with my 7th grader that I think I probably had as a sophomore in college. But our world is changing, so as a parent, I have to have those conversations, but those are conversations for me to have with my children, not for them to pick up a book and to your point, Rob, trying to figure out how much did she really learn in this video and where do I take this conversation with my daughter because I don't know what was presented in anything. I don't think it's our place to subject kids to what would go down is the definition of pornography.
Hey, Art, has anything like this content-based rating been discussed with like librarian staff or anything on whether or not it would be difficult to implement something like that or?
I don't know the depth of that. I know Mr. Siebers must talked a bit, I think, with Mrs. Richardson. I've had a couple of emails back and forth with Patty, but any?
I mean, overall, the rating system, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing, but the challenge is gonna be the time that it will take to implement something along those lines, because we're talking thousands of books. And if we've got to go page by page through every book that isn't identified by that,
advisory ratings.
Then it can be a challenge to get there, but, it is something that's out there.
So, I studied mass communication, so I've studied censorship in the press, and I've been a journalist in the military and for a newspaper publication. So I'm not a fan of censorship in a lot of ways. However, the question that I would pose to you is, whether this is mental reading because it's available in the library and our school walls, or whether you just imagine for a second that suddenly you took those same words, this same stuff right here, and you're sitting in history class, and some kid starts telling a story just like this right next to somebody else. I would be ashamed of our school district if somebody didn't shut that kid down and say, that's enough of that. We're not having that. That is not going to happen in my history class. We're not going to talk about that kind of stuff. That's inappropriate. Yet you can walk just a few rooms down, and you can pick this up off the shelf. And so that's the difficulty that I have in navigating this. Not a fan of censorship, love freedom of speech. However, under the guise of what our responsibilities are within the walls, kind of to your point, Sue, I don't think I would be ashamed if we had a teacher that allowed this kind of dialogue to go on in their classroom.
Ray, I have a question for you, and I don't probably want to read anything that's on any of these pages, but if I just put my finger down on a page and read the sentence that I landed on, and you could just imagine what the words would be, if they type that into a Google search, would GoGuardian catch it?
Most likely, that's the idea.
And what happens then?
Building administrator looks at that.
So if you got a notice that that was searched, what happens?
His building actually doesn't have that tool yet, but they will next year.
So I met with one of the principals, Matt,
Yeah.
on that question. There's a penalty box. Smart words are flagged. Many of those words you're talking about.
Yeah.
They're flagged, and then they are sent to the penalty box, which means they can't access the computer. And then a phone call is from this certain building principal. Then a phone call is sent to the parents. They speak with the parents before the kids are taken out of the penalty box. They can pull up each individual kid's account and what if there's a pattern that we're seeing with certain words searched. They get things outside of school hours. So if one of the Chromebooks are logged in at 10:30 at night, searching for things, that does still come to the building administrator. He can also pull at any time the most watched videos, the most flagged words in the school. And sometimes, like he says, if they're working on a Washington DC, the most watched video could be, something because 3 classes are watching it or something, but he can see everything. And so he can pull for the month, what were the smart words that were hit, and is there a common thing? So I went through it for about an hour, and it was very, very interesting. And the smart words are
not all medical terminology. They're the kind of just the layman terms of what our elementary kids would call certain body parts or call certain actions. But he says then after, if you're put into the penalty box so often, then a next step has to occur, some added education or something.
And we don't have that set up at the high school at all.
We have a filter that does filter out that content. It's just not as visible to the building administrator. So next year, when we're on Chromebooks and using the same product, that'll become more visible.
And I think too, I mean, Ray, you've done a really good job of letting people know about Go Guardian, but I guess I would say again for parents out there, if you don't know what Go Guardian is, get on it, spend some time, because that will also help you as a parent censor and figure out what's going on your kid's Chromebook as well.
I feel like I guess I like this rating system, Jeff, because families already understand it with our children. They use that rating system when we go to the movies. So kids would understand that. Families would understand it. So you're not taking the book out necessarily, although personally, if I would take this out of my home library, because it would, to me, that's, when you're talking about sexually explicit things happening between children or children and adults, it's highly inappropriate. It's different, but the words that are being used there are disgusting. But again, each and every family's not like mine, so that would allow a family to decide, I'm okay with my children reading PG-13 literature, or the rating thereof, the equivalent, an R, an NC-17, and NC-17 plus. And I guess, it looks like the majority of the material that's been shown to us tonight is sexual in nature, where the problem is. But, I think Art, you had Mein Kampf on the list there, which, is not, it's a different type of offense there that we would take as a public. So we all have different views on this. Sorry, Ryan, you were going to say something.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, I thought these were just maybe examples to display the rating system, but these are actually all excerpts from books.
Yes, and they've kind of been cleaned up so that I could present them here. If I may.
Yeah, you can.
So the Youth Advisory Rating.org group has a rating sticker shop, but I'm fearful to promote the stickers because I'm fearful that the kids would seek out the YA5. But I did bring an example of it, and if you want the complete excerpts that are the pages and pages of that first book with the red cover, you can scan in the QR code and you can see the pages and pages and pages of what's in the content in that book. So I'd like to pass these around if I could, but I wasn't going to promote the stickers on the book because, as I said, I was fearful that kids would seek out those books and then scan in that QR code and go right to those pages. So, so please don't misconceive that, that I'm promoting the stickers. I'm just suggesting the ratings.
Were you going to say something else, Ryan?
Well, yeah, so these are actually small snippets of literature that's available to high school kids. I agree the great rating system is good. You don't want to just jump on it. But I can't imagine a parent read this and say, hey, I think you should read this too. I just can't. And no teacher to Tim's point. No teachers actually read any of this aloud to a child. And so the system, the rating system is good. but there's a, you've got a responsibility to the parents out there, regardless of the level of concern and morality that they're going to have. I think they're all above what these excerpts. I just can't imagine an individual in town would want their kids to read this stuff. It's just, it has no educational content, no life improvement content, no literary. I guess I shouldn't say that because I haven't read the rest of the book, but there's a lot better books out there that can give literary guidance to children. So the rating system is great. 5 just doesn't need to be allowed. There's no need for it. There's just no, in my opinion, I just can't imagine there's a handful of parents out there that say, no, I don't want my kid reading that one. If that's the case, they've got their phone, they've got their home. That's our responsibility to keep innocent kids, children, on school district. Even having the opportunity. I mean, smoking's not allowed in school for good reason. Swearing is not allowed. Vaping, sex, certain and sexually explicit material has no place to go. So it's not.
Anybody else? Anything?
That's gonna. I'm gonna take as I try to look at everything from the middle ground. I think that's the best perspective to view everything is in the middle and you circle all the way around it. As a side note, I'll just say our world is becoming so polarized, and people don't talk to each other anymore. They yell at each other, and they don't try to speak. They try to convince, and that's just a side note. And I agree with everything that's being said. Some of these things are pretty explicit, but it's also snippets of a book without the context of the rest of the book. It's kind of like the danger of having a 5-minute video and showing a 5-second clip of it. It can be taken a little bit out of context. And I'm not saying I agree with this, but I guess what I'm saying is this world's made up of a whole lot of different people, and our school district is a representation of that. And I think we have a good process in place. I think this rating system is good. I think Jeff's suggestion of the permission slip before a book is checked out so a family knows, and I'm not saying I would ever let any of my kids check these books out, but I also understand that other people's family situations are different. Our kids might be going through different things that my kids are going through or experience different things in school, and I think it's important to understand that and understand where maybe a book could help that kid out. Once again, I'm not saying I agree with this explicit material at all, but looking at it from right in the center of it, circling around, I think our process is good. We have a review process. We have a way of rating it. I like Patty's rating system. I think it allows parents to make informed decisions within their own households. And I like Jeff's suggestion of the permission slip. And to close with what I began with, I think we all try to jam our own opinions down everybody else's throat. We have to start realizing that everybody has different perspectives and comes from different places. And as a school, we need to do our best to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I think the review system works. I think it's a good process. I think the suggestions brought tonight make it even better. And the way I view it, the way it has with the suggestion, if you don't want this material in your student's hand or in your house, it's not going to be. If this is something you think could help your son or daughter that's going through a difficult time, maybe that's something they can read. But, my favorite book, To Kill a Mockingbird, on page 174, has a word, if I were to yell it out right now, wouldn't look very good to Max Point. If somebody yelled out that page from 174 in a classroom, would not go over well. And so I think we have to keep that in mind as we're evaluating this. I think our system is good. I think it's a fair, thorough process. I think adding the suggestions to it will make it better. And I think we need to get to a point where, I joked at a previous board meeting, this isn't Burger King. It's not your way. This is a huge school system with hundreds and hundreds of kids and families from all different backgrounds and challenges, and we need to understand that and respect that. That's all I have to say.
Art, what kind of a process would it take if we did decide to do like a rating system? Like, is that a board action? Is that an exploratory committee?
I think your question really gets to, is it governance or is it management? And I don't think it would have to be a board policy. I gave an example in here in the middle school library, for example. There's a section of like teen choice books, or I'm trying to remember what it was exactly. Iowa Teen Award books for 6th through 9th grade. And that's something that the librarian reviewed and saw a couple titles. This, because they were teen choice books, they got in here without going through, a whole process. So she reviewed. I feel like the professionals doing this work could apply a rating system, could figure out how to implement a permission, parental permission on a checkout if they wanted to. I don't think it has to be at the policy level. I think there's a good deal of guidance already in policy and in Iowa code. I appreciate Ben's comments too. I get really conflicted about this, just me personally, because I'm pretty conservative in a lot of ways, but I'm an old English teacher too. And kind of like you, Tim, I'm not a censor by nature. And the book Ben talked about, To Kill a Mockingbird, I think it's a great book. I've taught it 11 times. It shows up on the most banned book list all the time. Other books like modern classics like Of Mice and Men or others, and because of language or because of racial issues, and I can remember teaching Of Mice and Men, good book. One of the main characters had a filthy mouth, and when we did read out loud, I was editing, and I also told parents and kids, hey, there's some language in here. If this is going to be a problem, we can find an alternate book. So I think there is a difference too. I mean, that was classroom curriculum. I think we haven't talked about it a lot, and I can appreciate the parallels to, hey, if we wouldn't want it said in class, why would we want it in a library book? I can appreciate that. But there is a difference, I think, too, between required curriculum and a library book that somebody has to go seek out. And I'm sensitive to what Ben said, because some of these books, and the ones that get raised, I read. Some of them aren't really my cup of tea, but I can see this might be helpful to a kid who is going through a tough time, maybe confused about some things, and I think it gets tough to just have it be my preference. There's in Iowa code, it talks about having a diverse collection, even in our school board policy. So, how do you have a standard, which I think school districts do. We do that all the time in different ways. We set a standard, and we say, and thinking back to a kid that I was a principal for several years. Likable kid, nice kid, could not control what came out of his mouth. Swore constantly. And school was the only place that mattered. Didn't matter at home, didn't matter where he worked. And we had to come to an understanding that, you've got to figure that out. So I'm not against standards at all. We are trying to work through things, either as they come up individually as concerns do, also on a process level. I think there is some commonality between what you heard out of people who are concerned and, the administration, librarians who are looking at solutions. So your original question, whose responsibility? I mean, I think ultimately the people doing work in the buildings, they need to follow law, best practice, board policy, keep all students in mind as they're doing it. And then the board role is oversight. The board role is to listen, as you've done that tonight, to give some direction. Obviously, there are things that go into policy. Usually, board policy flows from law, from Iowa code to board policy to student handbooks to building management. So there should be alignment, but I think for the most part, it's probably the professional responsibility of the people in the building.
I guess my thought with the rating system, and I'm probably not the popular opinion in the room here, if we go the route of having a rating system and having a permission slip processed, as a parent, I'm going to expect that to be followed. What are we going to do as a district if kids are kids and Johnny goes to the library and checks that book out because his parents don't mind it, and then he gives it to one of my kids, and my kids have now violated that policy at the school? Who's ultimately responsible for that? That's my question. And then what is the legal ramifications to the district for putting a policy in place that says, well, we're going to restrict this if you want it to be restricted, and then it fails? How do we fix that? And so I have concerns with the rating system. My preference would be that these books come to the board for review, and I know it's a lot of books to be read. The board is who was elected by the people of this town. And if they want to elect people that are going to approve books that are questionable, that's the community's right to do that. But if there are books that are questionable that parents do not want in the libraries, that's fine. Let's not have them available. And if the parents want to get these books for them, or if they want to go to the public library outside of our school, that's my thought. Because I think that puts a lot of risk on us as a board and as a district to say, well, we're just not going to let your child have access to the book.
I think the difficulty, if I may, Mac, is that there's going to be a litany of books. Like there's going to be a stack as from floor to ceiling on that wall for us all to read, or whatever. Because we're only addressing sexual content, which I think is important to address, but that's the only thing we're addressing here tonight. And while everybody at least appears to, at least say that what's mentioned in here is pretty inappropriate as presented, there's going to be other people that feel very strongly about other kinds of things that they would not want. And I do not think that we have the ability to sustain that volume of review.
What would you do, Art, to answer Mac's question there? How would that be handled if something like that happened?
If we went to that, I would imagine we'd have to have some type of a process in place if there was a violation, and A would happen, or B, C, whatever it needed to be to address those things if they were happening. I think it'd be a pretty good task in itself.
So if we go the route of the permission slip though, how do we make sure that we have a policy that teachers that would like to show something in class or would like to show something for a teaching moment, that those kids are removed out of that class according to their permission slip? So when I taught at Indianola years ago, we showed a video that Mr. Monroe saw it first, and we decided that it had really good educational content in it, but also had some very vulgar, some poor language and some other things. So we decided the best would be, we offered a parent viewing time, and then we offered a synopsis, and then they had to sign something. And we did have 6 kids, but the parents did not sign the form, and so we came up with an alternative activity for them to do in the media center. But if we go the permission slip way, are we going to make sure that if something is in class, do you see what I'm saying? Like all of a sudden they sign this permission slip that they can't check out these books. But is that gonna cover us too, as if they're in class and, you know, like, hey, I signed this permission slip, why in the world now did they hear this in a class? I'm just looking from a policy standpoint. Does that make sense? Or no?
I think, I'm guessing some teachers do that already, because I know we've received notices like, hey, this is gonna be taught, and then
Perfect.
if you don't want, I feel like that's happened before.
You guys are just forgetting what kids are like. I mean, you have to have permission to see the fourth grade movie, the boys and the girls, but see a fourth grade movie.
Right.
Let me just tell you that the kids that were banned came into my tag class and said, hey, what was that movie about? I mean, you guys gotta remember that these are still kids and they're still gonna talk about stuff, and it doesn't matter what kind of, I mean, I really think censorship is a slippery slope. So I am not for any of this, but I certainly am not. I mean, I don't mind the grading system, but the rest of it. We got a lot of people in this community, just like Ben said, and just because people here spoke, you know, had other people known that this was happening, we might have had 6 people speak on something different. So I don't think we can say, oh, this whole community wants this, because this whole community doesn't want this. So I think you have to find a middle ground, like Ben said.
I don't think we're talking about censoring anything, are we?
Well, if you take books out, that's going back to that logic.
I think the rating system, some form of a rating system in the permission slip makes sense. And I think what we have to keep in mind here too is, we're talking about the books that I guarantee you 99% of the high school doesn't even know exist. Like, they've been checked out under 5 times. So like, if we're talking about like, you know, material that I guarantee you most of these high schoolers are not seeking or know that is in there. And it gives that choice. If I don't think I would want my child to come home with one of these books, so I can address that at my house under my family rules, and we can deal with it. Now, if another family feels that book is appropriate, they can go through a process where they can get a permission slip and they can get it. And like I said, we're dealing with a relatively, what do you say, one of the books was never checked out and the other was checked out once or twice?
The first 2 books, I think, that came to my attention, one had not been checked out, one had been checked out once in 5 years, I think.
I mean, and that's just part of growing up and being part of a public school system, like, and just having strong family values, whatever your family considers their values, and then teaching your children then to, you know, collectively get along with a larger mass of people. For example, I'm sure there are high school kids over there smoking, and I hope as a dad I can convey to my kids that I don't want them to do that. So if they come across at the high school, they're not going to do it. Maybe there's some kids who do. I don't know. Bad example of the books, but I think we're dealing with a really small number of kids who are even have had their hands on these books. And if we go to some form of a rating system with a permission slip, I think it solves our problem.
Same direction. I think it's I don't know what the method is. I don't know if we're supposed to go and like review this further or what that looks like, or
If the board feels like they want to go one way or the other, or where do we go? We haven't had
Yeah,
something like that.
I would say, I mean, first of all, there is some time review involved, and there may be some tools like we heard tonight that would help hone in on potentially explicit books. But I think we need to give principals and librarians some time. I mentioned it here too, like over the summer, review maybe how that could happen. Up to that point, I think you may still have to do some things case by case. But I mean, it is. I think to Ben's point too. I mean, a lot of these books aren't new releases, so to speak, or we've had objection to instructional materials policy forever. All schools have, and then this has come to light. It has gotten attention. It is a big topic. So now we're kind of catching up, I guess. And I can't give a great answer to, well, why didn't you know? On some of these. But I do think, and not everybody will agree with this, I do think context is important. I mean, some of these books that have been raised, I've read, and I would consider them pretty worthwhile books, even though there may be a scene that, yeah, it doesn't coincide with my values or what I would want my kids to read. But in the end, that was a pretty good book. And I had another one that was brought up that I read that, I'm not a fan of at all. I could get behind removing it probably, but I could see how certain kid, certain situation, I read a review that said this book will save lives. Well, I don't know if that's overstated, but it's tough, and I think, again, to go back to Ben's point, I think as a superintendent, especially knowing that we are definitely polarized and we've got a lot of emotional issues, I think a lot of my job has been trying to serve kids well and steer us on a path, that does listen to different opinions, try to follow the law. You'll hear community standards in terms of content, try to have a handle on community standards, although those vary widely, like we've been talking about. So it's not an easy thing, and I think it is going to take time if you want to put in some kind of process and really review a collection and do some kind of rating system, figure out the best way to include parental permission if you want. I'm hearing pretty broad, consistent support on those two ideas. I heard Donna say, I am not in favor of censorship, but the rating system, okay. I'm paraphrasing. I think I heard you say that. It's not on here as an action item tonight either, so it's not a vote, but as I'm listening.
It's just, the content's the important thing in the book. What's the lesson learned? What's the content? What's the meat of this story? Most of the two that I read, one of them for sure beyond magenta would help a lot of kids that were questioning their sexuality. If they're not, I'm sure the kids wouldn't even look at the book, probably don't care about it. But not to have it offered for them, it's just not right. It's not.
So, I think it's something that I'll continue throughout the rest of the year, continue to have conversation with the principals, with the librarians. I think we're hearing support for the idea of rating system, of parental permission.
Those books are all reviewed by Book List, Library Journal. The librarians, before they even order them, they go down a list of book reviews before they ever even order them. So there are people that have reviewed these books and read them before they're even ever put in our libraries. So, right, does one get skate through once in a while? Probably, but I don't know. I think professionals do a pretty good job of figuring out what works and what's relevant to kids now in high school. And just because it wasn't relevant to you in high school doesn't mean it's not relevant now to the kids. So they see a lot of stuff that you never saw. Certainly I never saw. So.
And that's the point that hammers home to me. Fortunately in my life, I've never been at a place where I've felt lost or needed something, but there are kids that are. And maybe a book that I think is totally senseless or inappropriate might help them. And that's our job in public education, is we educate everybody, regardless of what your opinion is. And then you go home to your family and you have your family values. But this system, I think, allows for everybody to win in this situation. It keeps the books out of my kids' hands, but it might put a book into another kid's hands that needs it. And that's our job in public education, is to educate everybody.
So I think it'd be appropriate, to have a follow-up report, to have a progress report. There's definitely going to be more conversation around it.
Yeah, could you guys have something put together before the end of the school year, how it's going to be resolved and what you guys are going to do for sure, and then maybe a timeline of when we could expect everything to be.
you know, I presented this as an ideas thing, maybe you can flesh out some.
I think it'd be good to have, like, we don't even know what some of the obstacles could be, some of that kind of stuff. And so I think as part of that, your folks that would be involved in the process should identify some of the obstacles that they could, you know, what's the tail on something like this look like? What's a predictable, you know, timeline? I think you need to manage expectations because there's a lot of different people that think, you know, it's going to be this. And, you know, I don't know if there's a process of, you know, these books that we identified right here, like they can go behind the library desk and, you know, if somebody's specifically, you know, whatever, I don't know. I'm just saying, I think that as your report, I don't have this expectation that you're going to come and say, you know, without identifying some of the obstacles that you need or some of the limitations or where that would require additional resources and what those additional resources would look like. A staffing on it, I guess.
Yeah.
Anybody else, any final words on this? Okay.
Jeff?
All right, moving on to the human resources discussion action items. Memorandum of Understanding for Behavior Strategist position.
Yeah, just an update on this, the behavior strategist position, one that we approved, you approved a while back, and you have assigned a memorandum of understanding for me to add this position to the salary schedule, the teacher salary schedule. It's not the person that we hired in this role is not a certified teacher. They have certifications under some other behavior strategist type certifications, and so we have assigned MOU from the union to add them to the combined salaries. I don't know, is there a vote or discussion? I don't know. You already approved the position.
Yeah, I would have. They've approved the job description, right, and the hiring, but I think since it is a master contract issue in terms of adding it to that combined salary schedule, and the unions agreed to it, I don't think it would hurt at all to have board action on that, just in case we do need it. I think we should.
Okay.
What would be the action then to?
I would say just to approve the memorandum of understanding with the IEA to add the behavior interventionist to the combined salary schedule.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve adding the behavior strategist position to the combined salary schedule.
Motion made by Ben, seconded by Sue. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next is open positions under human resources.
It was requested just to have a list of what's open, and when the packet was put together, April 7th is when I pulled open positions, and we continue to fill them every day. Any questions over positions that are open or pending? Just kind of a list of them.
Are you getting decent volume of applications?
Yeah, it's getting later in the season, in the hiring season. All of our contracts are actually due tomorrow, so I don't know when other districts have their contracts due. So if someone doesn't sign tomorrow, I will follow up with them and see a post for your position. Are you intending to return or not? I know that our contracts are, what did we call them?
They're continuing contracts. It's Chapter 279, the Iowa Code. Any district, it just depends when they get them out. The earliest they can distribute contracts is March 15th, and then there's a 21-day period for teachers to turn them back in. And with the continuing contract, actually, if they don't turn their contract back in, the assumption is it's still in place, it's continuing. But we need to get that for a couple of reasons. One, if they don't intend to come back, we have to know. We obviously have to post for it. And two, in their interest, if they don't sign a new contract, then they're stuck with last year's salary. You know, and they want to get their 2.2% raise. So that's why Mimi's got to do a little legwork. There are a few people who are procrastinators, forgetful, whatever. You have to track down every year. So.
Mimi, does that, the associates that says it's only on a substitute basis after March 1st, is there like a number associated with that right now, or?
Not right now. I wouldn't have that information right now. Throughout the rest of the year, we do know how many open positions we have. But right now, we just fill them as substitutes. So if somebody was interested, we could put them in as a substitute. And then, as we get closer to the start of next year, with the associates, their job fluctuates enough if they find something else that they want to do. We don't pin down a contract or a letter of assignment at this point, but we wait till closer to the start of school to pin down those letters of assignments for anybody interested.
A couple things with that. The subs, actually, a sub-associate rate is the same as if they had a letter of assignment. And the reason they do that, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have this look-back period with the Affordable Care Act and insurance and things. So past that point, we don't start the clock on that period. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but.
Well, yeah, that's part of it, and also some of that, many of our associates don't fit to the Affordable Care Act process because they're not eligible for benefits. But also, we got a lot of rehires that we get, and we try to keep the benefits in a school year, so if they quit in January and go back to a different school in February, they would get benefits again, but they've already used all their benefits.
Yeah, I just thought the context in which I think Mac brought this up, the context I thought was just to make sure that we weren't in a spot where we weren't getting associates applying for positions and stuff like that. So that's the frame of direction.
I was on leave when it was kind of brought to my attention.
Yeah, so I was curious, are we having a steady application for associate positions even that we have that end up needing a replacement?
I haven't heard any huge concerns from the buildings.
Okay.
I mean, they've always, there's always people didn't show up that day and then have an attendance issue, but I don't know if that is any worse right now than it has been the rest of the year. But I'll definitely make sure that we have that updated, specific positions will be listed, starting again in the fall.
Sure.
Next is our state retention payment update.
Yeah, so, Greta and Kyle were here, and I think you guys have all been included on some of the emails from the union in regards to the retention payment. So, kind of as a recap, the state issued a $1,000 retention payment, which excluded 34.5 FTE from the Indianola Community School District, the media center, counselors, and those types of things we talked about. Both HR committee and finance committee met that week of spring break. I think that includes everybody but maybe Dr. Whirling, who's not on one of those committees. And we, presented this option to use those TSS funds, which are teacher salary supplement funds. And so I did a little bit of research on TSS and as a TSS, the rules around TSS are it's a mandatory topic of negotiation on how those funds are paid out, which is why we had to connect with the union in order to potentially use those. For this school year, right now, correct me if I misspeak, John, $6,300 has been paid to each certified staff on that salary, that combined salary schedule. It's paid out throughout the year. And then so a 5%, it's in reserve. 5% of those TSS funds is saved for reserves in case we have any staffing changes throughout the year. Whatever is left of that 5% reserve is paid out evenly to all of the certified staff on that May payroll. I think that was what they had referenced as well in their communication. They had asked about using ESSER funds and a couple of other different funds to pay that out. And we're already, we've talked through this, at both committees that we're already deficit spending next year. Our enrollment numbers were down, so we're deficit spending, and we've added 3 sections. We've added this behavior strategist position. We've added so many positions to take some of those funds from the general fund in order to pay out that 34.5. We made it even tighter. And those ESSER funds funds are already allocated for, we have an elementary math and reading interventionist that's assigned to those funds, and the technology integrationist, and we just have a lot of positions that were already spoken for in those funds. So that's, why we had offered or suggested that to use the TSS funds, because our general fund is already tight, and our ESSER funds are already tight, and whatever other acronym funds that was suggested, we've allocated, we have plans around that money already.
Jonah, approximately how much would be left at the end of the year right now
For
in
TSS?
TSS funds?
Well, I just wrote that out. Yep, so without taking any money for the retention, each teacher would get $361.54. If we were to. Estimated. If we were to pay that 34.5 FTE, that bonus, the retention would be $218.70. So the difference is about $142 of that TSS payment for that certified staff.
$142.
$142.84 approximately.
And that changes because we have other, another thing that happens is we have teachers that have children, have babies, and then they take off for the rest of the year, which would only benefit this number because they would take they would be docked those pays, and so that helps as well, and that's helped in the past. Another thing that this year it's $6,300 per teacher. A year previous to that, or in several years previous, it was $6,100. So we've divided more out into that to be paid up front. As we see, so it sometimes isn't always 5%, maybe a little less if we think we can handle that. And then next year it'll be $6,400. So we added another 100 into that.
What questions do you have based on, you were included on many of the emails throughout the process?
Yeah, I think we were all included on those emails going back and forth from the administration. I mean, this is what we thought would be best through HR and finance, where we found the money to be able to do this. So if we don't do this, we can't do the associates either then.
It sounded, I think in one of their last emails, although the IEA talked about it not being best practice to open the contract, we have for different reasons. I mean, we opened it last year to accelerate the associate wages. We just agreed to an MOU to add another position. And I believe I heard them say that if the request to not use TSS, or the request to use TSS funds was dropped, that they would entertain the associate piece of it. Am I right?
That's what I heard. It's not, we've not seen it in writing, but that is what I heard them say. If we separated the two, they would be open to it.
So we've added 12 positions over the last 2 years. Is that right? Really to help support our teachers. Is that right? Two sections at Wilder, one section at Irving, the behavior one we just did, teacher, elementary science, the pilot we're doing, technology, student family liaison, elementary reading math interventionalists, another support teacher. So those are all that money comes out of the general fund, correct?
Some of that is ESSER money.
Some of that's
we've
ESSER money,
allocated.
right.
Some of that's ESSER, but then if those continue.
But if you're gonna continue it.
Would be general fund,
Past,
which then deficit spends you.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. So we added these to try to get help to the teachers, help to technology, help to our kids to get them caught up in reading and math and all this to get us through this COVID. Some of this is ESSER funds, some of this are other grants. But if we want to continue these positions like this elementary science, if this pilots out really well, we're looking at adding 3 more just elementary science teachers, right, in the future? And that's all going to be general fund. And then we're already have a deficit spending next year is what it looks like in the general fund.
So then for us, so how much money would we have to take out of the general fund to help these 34 teachers?
About 40,000.
Just at 37,140.
Well, if you do that too, then, I mean, I do think, you know, originally, we treated this like other flow-through money that comes from the state. We followed the state rules, we gave it to the people that applied, not because we didn't want to give it to, you know, to other teachers who didn't meet the state definition, not because we didn't value other support staff, but because we were looking down the road where you're going logically right now. Okay, if you want to pay the other 34.5 FTE, this 37,000, okay, we can deficit spend another 37,000, but do we also want to extend that to our 100 associates? If we extend that to 100 associates, why aren't we extending it to bus drivers, food service, custodial,
And we just
administration?
We just increased childcare.
So, you know, it very much was a kind of an economic thing we were looking at. You know, yes, it would be a nice gesture, given that our student enrollment was down, given that we know the ESSER funds are allocated. How much of a general fund deficit do you want to run up for next year? I mean, it's.
How far are we in deficit next year, estimated?
I don't have that right in front of me because it's changed. I try to keep, I will bring it to finance to next week. I don't have that in front of me right now. There's a couple $100,000, I think, where we were.
It was at least a couple $100,000.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
I think this is hard because I don't know, I think this whole board values every single part of the equation in this district. Whether you're a bus driver or nutrition or childcare or our secretaries, our associates, teachers. I don't know,
I was surprised by the response. I thought that it was kind of everybody coming together to try and find a way to maximize. So I didn't expect the TSS answer to come back that way, I guess. I kind of thought that, you know, it was a good suggestion. I thought that it was something that everybody thought that way. And so we would leverage those funds in addition to if we needed to tap into the general fund as well. I just didn't expect it to come back and be presented the way it was tonight, as in that fashion.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's just hard to find the money because of the investment that we've committed to with these other positions, which we've listened and offered the help in so many different ways of trying, and that even goes back, you know, year or 2 years. Like during COVID, every time somebody's come to us and said there's too much on our plate, we've tried to find a solution to take it off. And I think that's what you see in this investment with a dedicated science teacher and the behavioral specialists and all these other positions. And so I just don't see financially where it works in a sustainable manner. And I wish we could. I mean, I think Sue nailed it on the head. Like, it takes everybody to run the school. Everybody. And everybody did a phenomenal job for the last 2 years getting us through it. I wish I had the magic answer, but I just don't know that it adds up right now.
Any other thoughts? Donna, Matt, Brian?
I thought we were gonna put the money for the associates on their salary for next year, that.
Can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
You know, that we talked about that with all the other staff is to try to gain better beginning wages for those people and truly call it retention, because then you have to come back next year to get that, and it would be
It's not like we were ignoring them.
For that.
Well, we can't do that for the associate. We could still do it for the
If they would
outside
allow, which they
associates.
did state here tonight, which is.
It sounded like if we separated the two, they would be open to
Okay.
doing that, and they can still do that for associates, and, you know, we can do that for the rest of that maintenance work group. So, I mean, that was our kind of our long-term plan anyway. How do we, can we give them a bigger bump in this coming year to get, get our base wage up, and then it, perpetuates that percentage?
So we can still pursue that.
But we still have these 34.
We still have that, yeah.
Do we know how many of these positions are gonna be paid for with the COVID money that really only lasts about one more year? Do we know?
That will then go into the general fund, you think?
Yes, yes.
The ticket and nutritionist would.
Digital learning environment support
So
person.
two, is there three? I think there might be three.
I know that the elementary reading and math support person will not be, that position will be ending.
That's just a 1 year.
And the extra counseling type, whatever we call that, parent liaison.
Liaison
Yep.
would not be going.
So if you had three, that would be, say, round numbers would be 80,000 per.
I think we have a
staff.
district nurse too, right? That-
Yes, there was a district nurse that we had, that wouldn't be as much. So if you had, the 80 times 3 is 240. You had a district nurse in there, you're just under 300. Well, you'd be under
Well, if we decided to do that, that's 3 more positions.
275.
But like Sue said, we had 3 more positions if the science pilot goes well as well.
Yeah, that was 3 in there. That's $500,000.
6 or 7.
Right. 6, 7-ish, yeah.
I mean, if we're not counting, are we counting Maddie in this for this year? Was she one of the 3?
She's a continuing teacher, so I look at her as what we've got right now.
Cancels or something.
I will have that in my, again, I don't have that updated because, as Mimi said, every day something changes, yeah. So I try to get that, the most current one out there when we do finance. And, the other thing to that is, do you look at, as teachers retire, as people retire, where does that look like? Is that something that needs to happen for an effort to try and keep these positions?
And I think obviously the wild card too is your student enrollment. I mean, we're having this, we've been good stewards. Our finances are in good shape. That's why we're not panicking over deficit spending, 200, 300,000, whatever it is next year. But if you, if you have a year of declining enrollment, significant declining enrollment, or string a couple of those years together, now all of a sudden you're having to do some cuts just to maintain status quo. You're not talking about adding all this stuff or keeping all this stuff. So next October 1st is going to be a pretty important date.
We do now, assuming that they would reopen the contract for associates, can we do what we can responsibly fiscally do now as far as the raise for associates and the support staff? That would, I think if we can do that, we need to.
That was kind of the drift that came out of those committees, one of the priorities, and I know one of the things we talked about that the ladies mentioned was, rather than the idea of a retention bonus, putting it on wages and getting it working for them year after year.
Right. Because that affects their IVers too.
Right. It's in essence a bonus plus over time. So.
And I think, that thankfully we do have a finance committee and we are monitoring this all the time, so it doesn't happen that you should be shocked at something that happens, because I think that we're watching this and sharing that information with you as well. So, yes, you can deficit spend for a year if you have a plan in the future to, okay, what's the next plan? But again, as we look at the ESSER funds going away, that's a plan, they call it the cliff. Its funding cliff goes away, then we have to figure out how do we make this work? And maybe we'll see a bigger dip that year, knowing that we've got to figure something out again. If you have attrition somewhere, how does that work? How does that look? So.
Is that a suggestion, a motion?
I think, well,
It's not on here as an action item
I think it's just getting back
But I
in front
think
of
it gives John a guidance to come back to the finance committee with and put hard numbers to it. And then that might be a future motion. I mean, you'll approve the letters of assignment contracts for next year, and you would be approving
a more than usual raise, for example, you would be approving any action, that deviated from the master contract once we, if they get that back open. And so you'll have approval, but just not tonight because we don't know the numbers yet, and we didn't have it on here as an
And
action
then
item.
the finance committee will continue to brainstorm about our other 34 employees that.
Well, I don't think there's any way to brainstorm. That's the only way
Yeah,
we can do it.
it's just a decision if you want to spend the
Or just take it
additional
on to do it.
37,000 or not.
Well,
Then, okay. Okay.
I mean, I think it would be important to remind them of approximate numbers. There, it's $142 shared by everyone. Approximately shared by everyone to give 1,000 to the rest of them. So that's, I
agree, I'm a little surprised about that being the number that would stop them from showing support to their.
I wasn't surprised because if you've been through collective bargaining and negotiations and the association, what they're there for, because if you look at it through that lens, that money is already theirs. It's going to get paid out. Why should this come out of, what's already designated for us? So I guess I wasn't that surprised by that reaction.
Just by the
And that's the first
presentation,
$1,000
the way that the presentation was presented, we think these people should be the benefactors of this as well. And so I just kind of thought that all hands on deck would pull together. I understand where you're coming from, Mark, and I get it. If you're already planning on the fact that you're going to get $361.54, and then it looks like somebody's taking a portion of that away from you, I get it, but I guess I.
Okay.
I think that gives some direction for the next finance meeting and where we're going.
Come to the finance meeting. Exciting.
It's the most exciting meeting of the week. You guys want to keep going? Do you need a break?
Can we take 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Can we take it? I need to get.
Yeah, that's
plug in.
That's fine. Yeah, sorry. I got your message a little bit ago.
We're about introducing our new principal and public comment.
I'm gonna leave the stream going because it's a little difficult to
No,
stop
we
and
don't.
start that back, so just be aware.
The stream's still going, everyone.
I do.
Hey. You know what? That never fails. That stuff happened to me too. There was one year our son, I had this his parent-teacher conferences when his Fairfield High School principal. Just like you and I. It's a big deal. Division III school gets to play the D1 school. And our son just had a great first half, and they were hanging. They were like 2 points at halftime or something. And I was trying to sort of watch some on the laptop, but failing miserably. It's like, man, of course. I was just kicking myself for it. And then I remind myself, you chose this dude. He's part of it. He talked about that. Good thing is he's a freshman, right?
Yeah.
So many. He's got 3 more. He's got many goals ahead of him.
He scored.
Oh, yeah, probably.
We're scattered.
It's my nature. Everybody's just got through. Yeah, it's.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Just had a good meeting.
Is Joey not running?
Another track. Usually she gets most of it too before she starts getting that stainless trace back. She's had for school 3. But she felt it pretty bad after that. Didn't bleed.
Yeah.
And so, the nurse talked to the gonna be cold, that cold.
Yeah.
Tuesday,
It's cold, it's been cold every single
well, every night's cold,
I
yeah.
know, except for.
And you can even tell during the 400 hurdles, so.
Yeah.
So this season, the important thing for her is she's trying not to go down to the Missouri State, and you and I, and that's like about 3 weeks. So we're kind of, we're trying to catch this innovation group for a couple of weeks, don't run. See if we can salvage the end of this track year, but for sure get through those tryouts.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's the same, students that cross country and the economy, very dangerous.
How do you had all four of the grades?
She's kind of a hard runner. Yeah. I mean, she's a tough runner, but she's a hard runner. Yeah. She does not have this.
Big enough. Yeah, oh, okay.
Pay enough.
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. I just wondered, because I didn't know.
So, we go to weather releases happening, it's supposed to be live.
It's what? Like, make this better.
I mean, I have chocolate. I don't know if I have chocolate. Yeah, well, I really Thanks, Phoebe.
You're right. They score a goal?
They won and he scored.
I told, hey, I should have gone over there. You can never get this moment in their life back, ever. Don't miss another game. Hey, I'm just joking. Wow. Don't miss another game.
I know.
We'll forget. Don't miss that stuff. You'll never get us back.
Yeah, that's sad.
That's all right. Now you got to do it again.
Did she actually record it?
She didn't say that.
Really? So that's why Ryan, I appreciate so much what he did when we were busy with that superintendent search, because family stuff comes first. It's always number one. It's always number one, like the rest of the stuff. That's why there's 7 of us. There's always enough to figure it out, right? So,
Because already,
but just, like, that's my biggest goal is never meet get it back. About the time you miss one, they do something exceptional. And
Ryan, did you
it's
bring
just not
peanut
the
butter
same seeing
M&Ms?
it on a video.
You didn't bring peanut butter M&Ms?
Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't think we need a glucose shock or anything like that?
I think we're.
I have a couple of peanut butter Rice Krispies you can have.
No, I'm good. I got it.
those
Smelly
Scotch
stuff. That was your dinner, though.
It was, you want one?
Oh, I'm good.
So Scotcheroos must be an Iowa thing, because my wife's from Kansas City, and she had no idea that they were called Scotcheroos.
Well, these are different than what we called Scotcheroos when I was a kid. Ours didn't have the peanut butter and the actual.
Those are special K-bars.
Well, she's from Minnesota, so.
You're still streaming, correct, right?
We started the special K-bars long before.
Better jump back in,
All
guys.
right, here we go. Sue ate them up during her downhill skiing trips.
Hey,
Hey.
bigger, faster, stronger.
Okay, let's go ahead. Get going again. Sorry, guys. Auxiliary service building project is next.
We need to open a public hearing,
Yes.
invite anybody from the public who would like to speak on that project.
And then, is there anybody here to speak for or against the auxiliary services building project? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the public meeting. Right. So then review and bid acceptance.
Do we have Carrie here from Envision to speak to the bids and answer questions?
Do you want to speak Carrie first before any questions, or what would you like to do?
Well, I would just offer that I'm here to answer any of your questions. Upon receipt of the bids on March 29th, there was a good response from your bidding pool. Through the bidding process, there were a lot of contracting teams looking at your project. If anyone have pulled the plan holders list, and I've sent that to Art and Jonna and Bernie several times through the bidding process, there was just a lot of good interest in the project. We're all aware by the bid tab that the dollar amount exceeded where we hoped we were going to be. We have had open conversation with the team since the start of the planning for the project that we're in a very volatile market, and we try to predict those things as best we can in our estimates that we provide for you. We don't like to be off, but those things do happen. I know there have been some questions about what the meaning of unit prices are, and I wanted to just go through that real quickly for you as an informational item. We do have a base bid and then 2 unit prices included in the bid form, and then acknowledgement of the 4 addenda that were issued during the bidding process. The base bid would include all of your basic construction. So in this case, we did not have, for this project, we did not have alternates identified in the bidding documents. Alternates would be pieces that you would either decide to add or deduct or something like that. I'm sure you've seen those on other projects that you've had bid in the district. We did not have those. We just had a base bid of the all-inclusive building, which we were here to present a couple months ago prior to bidding. The unit prices are related to excavation costs, basically getting your ground ready, or the prep work that needs to happen for both the footings that support the building and then the slab on grade, the concrete that makes the floor of the building to be put in place. In Indianola, you have particular soils here that require some extra excavation, and there's some extra compaction and things that have to happen. You have a highest clay content and a lot of moisture in your soils, and so there's just some particular things that need to happen. In this case, as just something different than maybe has happened in your past projects, our geotech report came out during the bidding process. And so I just wanted to talk about, so your unit costs are related to those preparation of those soils and getting ready for the slab. Our documents call out to follow the geotech report for any of those preparations. So I would just share with the group tonight that anything that should be required should be provided in the base bid of the contracting fees. These unit costs are meant to provide a way for the school to monitor costs on if anything, in addition to the base bid, if there were some unforeseen conditions that the contracting team might run across while they were doing the work itself, that you would have a way. Typically, they're used to monitor those so that those costs as a change to the scope don't get out of hand. In this case, they came in kind of all over the place, which I know there's been some concern and just a lot of questions around it. So just wanted to share with you that we feel like the documentation covers all the base bid of work, that we would not anticipate a huge need to utilize either unit price number 1, which would be the conditions under the slab on grade, or in the footings. But that you should be knowledgeable that there is a lot of under excavation basically that has to happen because of your soil conditions here, but we feel like that should be covered by the document language itself.
So I have a question, I guess a few questions in regards to that specifically. Why was that not placed in the base bid?
It is in the base bid. So if you were to open up the drawing, said it's detail A6 on structural sheet A5.01, I believe it is, or 5.0. There is a slab on grade detail that refers to the under slab conditions, and then it says refer to the geotech report. And so the geotech report was provided in the addendum, which makes it part of your base bid conditions.
So the 6.598 million includes all the work that would be done for Unit 1 or Unit 2 if needed?
It would. So Unit 1 and Unit 2 would be anything outside of the base bid. So yes, to answer your question, it should include all work required for this building that we're aware of at this time. If there are things that we cannot see that that would come up during construction, then you would utilize unit price 1 or 2.
And that soil report.
That's extra.
That soil report is based on borings and things they did, and it tries to anticipate what the project will entail.
Yes.
I mean, so when you say unforeseen, it's not that there's none of that included, it's just if there's a surprise that's not included in the soil report?
Correct, yes. So there's so many borings that were taken to establish the recommendations from the geotech company that issued the report, who was Alan Derbutsky in this
Right.
case.
So I called Matt at Alan Derbutsky, and he said that it would be his professional recommendation that excavation of slab on grade, that we would be doing that for the entire surface of the building there.
That's correct, but that should be included in your base bid is what I'm trying to relay. These would be that, so you.
So you're saying there's no extra cost then? If we have to excavate, so what he said is like, you're gonna have to take 3 foot down, take it times the square foot of your building, and then divide by 27. So you're saying, if they do that, whoever, or I guess the lowest bid is graphite there, the lowest bidder there, if they do that, we're not going over 6.598 million.
That's our interpretation of the documents that we issued, correct? That should be included in their base bid.
Because there is some grading in the base bid contract, lots of grading.
Correct, so that drawing that I referred to talks about the requirements of the under slab preparation, which would make that geotech report the basis of those requirements, which would be the 3 foot excavation underneath that slab.
So what would be an example of when we would be charged that $250?
So that 250 there would be 2 different conditions. So the one is for below the footings. If there were like really unreasonable exceptions to the borings that were completed, you might get a little pocket for a limited area where you have some really strange things happening in the soils that no one could detect. And the same thing under slabs, that no matter how many borings you do, we just have some anomalies that happen in our Iowa earth and landscapes and things that we can't predict everything. These are meant to protect you from having too much cost added to it later on, but we try and encapsulate everything that we know on bid day within the base bid itself. So I would say, so let's say you get to some really loose soils and they're like, there's no way we could have anticipated this in our bidding scenario based on the soils report information provided and the borings provided, then you would utilize these unit costs to adapt for those limited conditions where there might be some anomalies to the report.
You did the borings, did they find something, like I always hear the phrase expansive clays?
Yes.
When we're talking about Indianola, did they find that when they bored?
They did.
And that's kind of factored.
Yeah, it's not typical construction to have to replace 3 foot of soil below your slab on grade. Usually you would go down, maybe 6 inches and compact it and put in your compacted rock, and then you put your slab on top of that, So this is a little bit of a unique
So it's
situation.
hopefully over-engineered to start with?
I wouldn't say it's over-engineered, it's just what you need to do in response to the soil conditions that you have here. Yes.
Why is there such a discrepancy in those per unit prices? I mean, because they're all over the place.
They are all over the place. Each bidder is allowed to collect that information in their own ways, and until you select a team to work with, because it's part of, well, you wouldn't make a selection only on your unit costs. It is part of their bid number to you, so we have to be careful the kind of questions we ask about those types of items until a team is selected. After a team is selected, we can really sit down with them and talk through what that looks like. Sometimes, and I'm not saying I don't want to infer anything in these cases, there's just different levels of understanding. It's not the only project that's had a wide range of costs for unit costs. This one's a little bit higher than any of us would have anticipated. But I don't have a direct answer why theirs is so much higher than the others.
But if that soil would be bad, then we would be paying $250 per cubic foot as opposed to $37.50.
Right,
If they
yes,
ran into some
yes.
issues.
You would also have the opportunity to work with that contracting team to come up with, if there's I don't know that there's an alternate solution this way, but there's other ways, to work through those things as they would come up after you have a team selected. Yes.
Carrie, I have 2 questions. The first one, you said
that's, and I'm just the way that you answered that question about being all included, was that was your interpretation. Do you believe that all of those that bid on this project, that's their interpretation as well?
I believe that only because your bid numbers are very close to each other. And that's a type of number that you would see reflected and probably see higher deltas between your low bid and your high bid. But as in a range for a public bid scenario of this size, we would say that's pretty tight between the low and the high bid in this case. So you know that everybody pretty much saw the documents the same way when we see close numbers together.
Except for those numbers right there. That's where
It says for the unit cost, but that's where we don't know exactly where they, how they arrived at that. It could be that.
But is that a clarity issue in how it's presented to those bidders then? Because if that's the case, then that variety, that disparity between $37.50 and $250 a cubic yard, and if the contractors know that they have the ability to flex in that area, then that's a pretty wide swath. And if there's not a common understanding and a common interpretation shared by all that bid on that project, then I feel like that has some holes in it, I guess, is my reaction to that. Just by the way that you answered some of the other questions.
I can't disagree with you. I think it's a very fair comment and question back to us. I didn't put together any of these teams' numbers, so I can't say and tell you with 100% certainty what you're going to see if you choose to accept it, the low bid. I mean, the Chapter 2610 code, requires public entities to accept the low bid in the public interest. But you also have the right to reject all bids and to rebid this. If you would like further clarification on those items, we could work and admittedly, we could provide some further clarification if that's a route that the district would like to pursue. And, having everyone have that geotech report earlier as well, and it's not necessarily desirable for that to go out as an addenda item, but it happens, and they had it in plenty of time to receive their bids, and it looks like it was reflected. I mean, everybody acknowledged receipt of that, and again, because the bids were very close to each other, it looks like they bid it in the same eyes. So we can't promise numbers are, of course, going to be lower. They could go up, they could go down. We just don't know in that scenario.
My second question is if you know, like you identified those pockets and those areas where you could potentially have some soil issues and stuff like that, since they already know basically where the building's going to go, do they already do their boring in those areas?
So what we did, we did borings in that area as part, the district paid for those services to provide that information to the contracting teams. And I believe that there were 4 to 6 borings completed at the corners of the building. And I think that the corners and then 1 or 2 in the middle of the building just to test. You did have some borings that were in the vicinity, but we weren't comfortable with those and had asked for additional information with this report to be completed. But it is at the site and at the corner points, which would be the typical protocol for this type of study. Yeah.
So that's so looking at this and understanding some of this, and following up with the geotech company, and they've already determined that there is unstable soil, and it's his opinion that the project's going to require, typical for Iowa. So the base bid, and then the total base bid plus the select alternatives is the same for each of them, so it does not include Unit 1 and Unit 2 pricing. And so with the tight bids for several of those base bids, but if you do the math, and say the project does require Unit 1 and Unit 2 to be fully done, achieved, that it's like I just did, it's well over $500,000 that would be on the backs of the school taxpayers because it's not built into that price. So I guess that's how I view this is you've got bids that are very similar, base bids, but if in fact Unit 1 and Unit 2 pricing are on, the graphite is the last one you want to do project.
Is
they're high on the unit.
And that's all extra, that's on top, and so that's just more taxpayer money that's not accounted for. It doesn't put any onus on Graphite to make a better bid for that. These other folks that put a little bit of responsibility on themselves to make it more pleasing to us, the consumers. So that's kind of how I.
But according to state law, do we have to accept based on base bid, or can we?
We did not provide, if we were going to look at unit costs, we would have had to provide a quantity to base their bid off of. So like if we were to say, please provide a cost per cubic yard based on 100 cubic yards or 1,000 cubic yards, then you would have a basis to compare those unit costs on. We did check with the Master Builders of Iowa just to verify that, because that was a question that Art and John and Bernie had brought to us, and as well just to be prepared to answer your questions here this evening, and we did check with them. And there's not a set path to do that unless it's really outlined in the instructions to bidders that this is how we want to receive your bid and this is going to be part of that selection. And that was not included on your project. It could have been, but it was not. So,
Would that
and
have
this
protected us more as the owners of the project? Because I feel like the way this is done, it's protecting the contractor more than us as the owner.
These were intended to protect you because in some projects you'll get these things run away, and you use unit cost to say, I know what that set cost is going to be. Just again, because of the inconsistencies in our soil, having these excavation costs are common in many projects. That you're not required to have them, but it's used as protection for the owner. As we work for you, we're not working for this contracting team that you're having bid your project. Our responsibility is to provide documentation and projects that meet your needs and that are in your interest. So in no way were these intended. I can understand how you might read that and feel that way as a board member here and asking me these questions, but that would never be our intent or how this was intended to be written. It was meant to protect you as a district from seeing cost overruns in the construction process rather than kind of what we're talking about this evening.
Carrie, I heard you mention you could provide some further clarification if we want to dig into that soil report more. And then I think I also heard you talk about rejecting all bids. A couple questions on that. Mm-hmm. One, I think I understood that if we were to reject all bids tonight, that if we were to rebid, we would have to substantially change the project, either increase or decrease scope by 20%, because now their bids are public.
So the Iowa code is not written that way by the letter of the code, and we also sent that question to the master builders who, they're currently reviewing that with their legal team, but our advice they had also recommended to review it with your legal team. There can be sometimes kickback about that, but as the code itself is written, it states that, and I can send that as a memo to the group here, just for that language around the public bidding, that you don't have to have a specific change of scope or a length of time. It's just you have the right to reject all bids.
Okay. Other related question. I think we have, is it 45 days to accept or reject bids?
I believe that's correct, yes.
So, assuming our second April meeting fell within that 45 days, I think it does, would there be a benefit if we weren't sure tonight to tabling versus rejecting tonight, if the board doesn't want to accept?
Procedurally, yes, but I don't know.
Are you asking?
Well,
I feel like
think,
there's some open questions.
well, I
that
feel
need
like,
some more
I mean,
vetting.
obviously if we reject all bids, that's pretty final. The project's stalled, or we're gonna have to rebid at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if we tabled and there was more information that made people who were reluctant more comfortable, or it made more sense or whatever, then potentially they could be accepted April 26th versus, no, we're done.
I just want to hear more on that soil report, like whether the contractors really understand that was included in the base bid, like you said, because that's worrisome if they didn't. Because that, like Brian said, that could be an additional $500,000.
Yeah, the way they did it wasn't amount of the bid didn't include any of, price one or two, because they weren't given like she said, 1,000, just a random bid it for 1,000 cubic feet of soil that needs to be removed and replaced, and bid the project with that as a fact. And that would change this, the outcome of this. There wouldn't be the same list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And that would give us time to also look at other options if we had to go to a different option. Because 500,000, that really blows the budget.
Well,
We don't have
the
that.
budget's pretty stretched already, just
Yeah.
because of the market conditions, so that would be very tough to handle if we got into it and had to come up with
an additional fund.
I do want to be clear that we tried our best. We did have a late SLOS report that had that cost for, the requirements for the underslept there, but the base bid should include, it's not like we are anticipating these outlandish costs out there. I can't stand here and earnest promise that, but that we made documents and created documents so that was included in the base bid cost. It should be, we'll do some additional vetting.
That's what they should have
That's what they
interpreted
should
as.
have done, but, yeah.
So you could find out from each of those builders or contractors if they thought that way to make sure you guys would be able to
We
make
just
sure
need to
that-
verify how we can ask that question. We don't want to ask questions that put the district at risk because of the public bidding laws. And that's where we had put that into master builders as a secondary kind of legal resource to that. Because we can't set up a scenario where we're trying to select based on certain criteria. It's just an open process, right, with the public bidding, and that's the way it's all intended to be, and that's the basis of 2610 and the Iowa Code. So we want to just abide by that. So, but
And
certainly I'll follow up with MBI again tomorrow and see what they've learned. But if you wanted to table that, we can certainly report back what we can and cannot ask and find out and go through, and we would do that with each of the teams. Just to make sure that it's fair across the board, so.
Well, is it that you just need to clarify, just showing your document that you talked about, the A6, that talks about the grade conditions, if that's clear, it's up to them to then interpret that correctly, right?
That's what I'm saying, Donna, yes, yeah, that it's there, yeah.
So
maybe that's what the board would like to see, more of what
I don't
that
want to get
looks
into a
like.
big old back and
Right,
forth, and
right.
once we accept something like that,
Mhm.
oh, well, we thought this, and we thought this, and this person
Right.
said this, and all of a sudden we're in a big mess.
And that's part of our duty to you as your design professional to say, no, this is where it's shown, you're required to provide that as part of your base documentation, so.
And Envision is our contract administrator, so they will be on site, and they will be addressing some of these issues with whoever is chosen.
And I don't think I've ever been involved in a project where there hasn't been some of, the architect reminding the contractor of what the specs are, or some work was done that wasn't up to spec. Or on the other side, the contractor saying, hey, we need to do this for the building to be right, but you didn't spec it. And that's where, we're running into a change order.
Right.
I don't know if I've ever had a project that didn't have some change order or some credit. So, some of it's gonna happen. I think the thing here is that this understanding is not, one little one-off, it's a big part. And I think, any project you design, yes, you're trying to include everything in the base bid that we anticipate is gonna be part of the project. I think that's kind of the key. And then hopefully, and again, maybe look into that soil report a little more, and hopefully the borings are reflective of what we are gonna find. But yeah,
So I would be in favor of tabling it.
We need a motion to table it.
Maybe.
We would.
Can I just ask, I just would like to know, I will do some more question asking. Are there any other questions from the board that you would like clarifications on from these teams while we're meeting on that? Or is this the topic that is, that you would like to receive information on? Are there any other questions that you have that you'd like me to address?
I have none. Anybody else?
My only thoughts were is that I went down a path of clearing up the ambiguity, because I feel your comment was, I believe, you know, that was our interpretation, and I just have curiosity if that's the same
Sure.
way that everybody was viewing it. And so, validate assumptions.
Okay.
And,
I do think that
ambiguity, that's.
the only concern I've heard from any board members or anybody was related to unit cost. I mean, I think we all understand that construction cost and things are very volatile right now.
Right.
I'm just worried.
I think just trying to understand if we can afford the project or not.
Sure.
That being the wild card is the only thing I've heard from the board.
Well, I'll just add and then I'll be quiet and let you get to your business, but, and we completely understand this as our first construction project with the district, and we want it to be a good one, and we want you to feel comfortable in the numbers that you received and the confidence in our team and in your contracting team. We're here, as I mentioned earlier, to be your advocate. We are not here to advocate for the contractor, but part of that is working with the contractor to get you a great project and a great process along the way, and we really take that to heart. So I would love to take the time just to get this cleared up and to have a really good process moving ahead so you have more confidence in that as you're out and speaking. And, you know, I'm sure your community members have a lot of questions for you as well that you have to address, so.
When's our next facilities meeting?
That's until the first part of May.
Oh, okay. So do you think you can have all of this before the next board meeting? So the
Yes,
administration
definitely.
can-
Yeah. Yep, and I'll share that out as soon as I have it. I won't hold that. I'll just share that with our regular team and then we
You
can
think
get
you'd be
that.
able to come back in person the 26th too, Carrie, or?
Yeah, I should be able to make that work, so, yeah, I think that would be important. So, I have that written down.
Somebody want
Okay.
Okay, motion made by Tim to table, seconded by Sue. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, motion is tabled.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie.
I'm just curious, if we decide at the next meeting that we want to start over with that process, how quickly can we restart?
Yeah, I think that's something, the question, if the board does reject bids, then what's the timeline look like to get things geared back up, was kind of the question.
So, these are always tricky because the public bidding law is very open and intentionally open, right? So there are no timeframes noted in the code. I would like to talk to, or have some conversation with your legal team just to understand the interpretation of that. But let me put it on the list. We have it in our question list to the MBI, just because you're correct, and I have shared that, you know, there's always this kind of word on the street that you need to reduce scope and you need to wait, you know, 6 weeks or some period of time. But there's nowhere that's written out that this is the requirement. It's kind of this like working agreement that's built up over time. So it makes it a little bit tricky to very clearly answer your questions. So because we go back to, you're required by law to follow code 6 now, right? And it does not define it there. And that was the initial response from NBI also, that you can accept the low bid, you can reject all bids, and you can rebid the project for those guidelines. Choices. Yeah, choices. They like to keep it open for, you know, for the public sector to be able to work with them.
Mac has one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I understand you don't have a crystal ball by any means, but what do future projections look like? Do we think that if we wait a year, we might be in a better situation with construction costs? Or do we think that's going to continue to increase as it says right now?
Your construction costs we have this conversation all the time with contracting teams and just talking about where things are going to go. So your costs are not going to go down. There is an anticipated plateau, and again, I'm not a magic worker here or a magician, but that's what we're hearing from the industry because it's how we put together our numbers that we're planning to bid next year, right? Where you have to ask all of these questions. So there will be a plateau. So what have the industry seen that have seen a significant increase are your electric has really gone through the roof, steel's been really incredibly high, and wood has been really high. So, you know, you probably see those things if you're doing any home improvement projects, even at the consumer level. Those are true in the industry. What we've been told that those are going to plateau, and so we were undervalued for a long time in our products in the US, and we kind of caught that curve all at once, and we'll see that start more on a regular incline, not the steep one that we've been on in the last 2 years or 18 months. We'll get back to a gradual incline again. What will change a little bit is as we catch up, as you're aware, and we talked about the last time I was here, that we have this lag time in product delivery, right? So your precast panels, in this case for this building, have like that 10-month procurement time. Those are likely to get better as the industry gets repopulated with workers, and that they're able to get there. It's really been a kind of a supply chain item where they can't get all the materials to make the products that you're needing to build your building. So that's anticipated to get better. So with that, you could see some labor reduction maybe, but I don't think it's significant, and you'll have an inflation cost from year to year where that you would regularly anticipate. This last year that was 7%, a typical year that might be 4% or something like that, and just your overall kind of, if you're thinking about what it costs me to bid it now like we did versus let's say at the end of March in 2023, you should anticipate that's in any condition, any economic condition, that would likely be like 4% higher with your material and labor.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thanks, Gary.
Have a good evening. Sorry, it took like forever to get to you. Okay, next is the 2022-2023 certified budget.
We need a public hearing. Our public has just left. Somebody left.
A lot of people were here.
Last year,
I
too.
thought it was going to be good.
Hell of attrition.
So, anyone here to speak for or against?
That's why you're on the board. You have staying power.
Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And then
Nothing has changed
just need a motion.
from the last two times we've talked about. The one thing that I do want to talk to you about is in the actual document, it talked about it's called this Form 703, which is our debt. We identified originally the 2019B bonds to be the ones that we're using to do this pre-levy, which will be the next thing we're talking about. And in the next document, you'll see that we will choose that later. That supersedes this, but I just wanted to let you know that once we publish the budget, even though that document wasn't published, it locks that, so I can't change that. So I don't think it affects anything that we're going to do. And if I have to, we would take the 2019B bonds anyway. But he was gonna make sure that that was actually the best financially for us. And originally that was what he thought, and then with conditions, he thought it could change. So leave it open, well, at that point it couldn't. So just an FYI. Other than that, it is exactly the same that is what we've talked about the last couple months. And it's just adoption. We then submit it to the county for certification if you guys choose to adopt it. We do need a budget, but if you don't want to adopt it, we'd have to figure something else out.
I'm gonna stop.
So we just need a motion if somebody wants to.
Make a recommendation that following public hearing, the board adopt the 2022-2023 budget as presented.
Motion made by Tim. Seconded by Matt. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Next is legal speak, like true legal speak.
Is this the surplus levy of general obligation? Are these the go bonds?
Yep, general legal bonds, school bonds. So basically, again, we're looking at the $730,000 that we will levy this year to get us up to our $4.05 so that we can continue to pay off quicker. But we don't have anything that we can use it for until next fiscal year. So as we do this, we're going to collect this $730,000, and then when it's callable, we'll pay that. That's what I was talking about with the 2019B versus some of the other ones. So this identifies that the board will choose what's best in February of 2023. So
okay.
or or in the spring of 2023.
And then another motion would be required.
Make a motion to approve the surplus levy of GO bonds for the fiscal year 2023.
Motion made by Mac to approve. Seconded by Ryan. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next is the monthly financials.
You see, really every fund is pretty healthy going into February. Usually, our second half property tax come in April, so you start to see and it's going down a little bit, but not to the, we're much higher than we've been in the past when you look at that cash flow analysis of the graph. But general fund alone, we're 1.5 million up. So again, that has helped us. That's cash, not budget. And our so we have to monitor that. And again, we will monitor that through finance and through just our day-to-day and month-to-month operating.
And as you've been saying too, I mean, that's reflective of all this miscellaneous income, all this federal money, ESSER money is in there and is being gradually expended. So there's, it looks like there's a big bump right now, but a lot of that's spoken for.
Right, and as you look at it, it really mimics the past years. It still follows that same trajectory, but it's just that much higher.
So it wouldn't be surprising to see next year follow more of the 2020 path.
Possibly. I mean, or, is that your new plateau? You start there and you follow this path that we're at. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Cash.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what you mean. Huh. Okay.
That's
Any
interesting to
questions
see
for
that.
John?
That's 10 years worth of
Right.
cash flows, so.
Any questions for John on the monthly financials before we approve those? Okay. Just need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Motion made by Mac to approve.
I don't touch financials, it's not my thing.
I'll second. Seconded by Ben. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That was the fastest, most fun part of the night. Flew by like that. Okay, next is the board facilities committee meeting report.
I can handle that. Had the community member community group meeting at the high school last week. Pretty good turnout, 30 community members. I think Rob and Mac, you guys were there. Sounds like the replace in place is the overwhelming favorite amongst people. That would be the option B that we've looked at earlier. So I think there's some more meetings planned here in the immediate future and just try to continue to educate the public on that. The auxiliary services building, I think we've discussed that at length, so we'll skip that. Middle school tennis courts, obviously we've talked about with the auxiliary services building, at some point they're gonna have to get, they will be demolished and it will be turned into green space. I think Bernie said it would take 2, but
Yes, the soccer world well knows how long it's gonna take.
2 growing seasons to get those fields. And by growing seasons, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he said fall and spring. So not 2 calendar years, but 2 growing seasons.
Oh, that's good.
So Rob can be out there kicking a ball in no time. Talked about the solar energy update. It's something that's definitely on our radar that I think we feel as a facilities committee, it's something important to research. Tim's kind of spearheaded that. Tim and John are going to be looking into some school districts that already use it and try to establish some meetings with them to kind of get us a better direction moving forward with that. Middle school media center and special ed classroom renovation projects, pre-bid meetings were last week. And how was that? Any questions? All right.
Good.
Is there any need? Okay. Thanks, Ben. Facilities project update.
You saw the punch list stuff in the, for the auditorium, detailed pretty well in your consent agenda with pictures, and, you know, dollar amounts, associated with each thing that still need to be done. We've talked about the auxiliary services bid, tabled that tonight. That budget discussion for savings to BD, once you've accepted bids, you can't really do it prior to that, but if bids are high and you accept bids, then you can do what's called value engineering. You know, you can go back and look, you know, is there anything we can squeeze a little bit? Now, we did do some of that throughout the process, just knowing.
You guys already did that.
We did. We had several iterations of that as we were designing, just knowing what the environment was. And, you know, but that's something we can take a look at. Mentioned the high school renovation meeting. There's going to be postcards being designed right now to go out to people to ask them to take a survey, again, to push things out in the community, working with the Gallagher group on that. And then also there is another community meeting. I saw the date suggested, reserved, and I can't remember right now. It just was an email today. But there will be another one, and we'll publicize that well. Still waiting on the final padding.
That's for the high school part.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes, that's for the high school, long-range planning. Waiting on padding yet. Everything is framed, windows, doors in, at Laura Goes Wilder for those rooms. Bid opening tomorrow on the middle school project. I think you've heard mentioned before, Emerson, need to do some sewer line work and tear up that west hallway. And then there's continual every year, you know, just looking at flooring, painting, roofing, sequencing of projects, concrete, what do we need to do? So, anything else on any of that, Jonna, that I glossed over?
Next is the board policy committee meeting report.
Yeah, there was a couple of things. Many of the changes were made, we're just kind of fixing some repetitive language, not any content, taking an attitude, just more how it's written and worded. Grammar, retiring, I think 501.9 is that he retired because it was the one that associated with the learning from remote learning because of the public.
That goes back to the governor's emergency proclamation, which has expired now. We're just catching up, so.
That one just addressed that, so the other one was truancy, truancy policy that all the information really was in our handbook, our board approved handbook, so it didn't need to be rehashed in the policy 501.10R1.
We just added a sentence there, just, you know, to make sure everybody knows that these regulations will be included in a board-approved student handbook. That's something that's in the handbook every year, so.
Okay. So we just need a recommendation to approve those policies 500 to 501.6.
This is the first reading.
First reading. Motion made by Ryan. Seconded by Donna. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next is the board calendar.
One question on the table from President Keller was, you heard Jonna mention that the next board facilities committee meeting scheduled isn't until May 5th. And with some of the stuff going on with facilities, Rob was wondering if we wanted to try to have one prior to next board meeting, or.
Sorry.
No,
Kind of
you're
important.
batting like 1,000 for the committees I see, and you took me, woke me up early on vacation day. you know, to
Ruin
do
your family
to
visit.
do HR during spring break. And did our search firm on December 27th.
What's great is that you're not better about it.
You kept those.
When would you like?
I should have just kept going. Like,
When would you like to, like, you want it before the 26th?
I think it would be wise to have that.
So HR's on
What's going
HR's on the 21st.
Well, and we typically, we'll put the agenda out for a Tuesday meeting no later than Friday, so really you're going back probably at least 4 or 5 days from that 26th. I guess
The 19th is finance.
just wanna
20th
flip?
we could.
You just want to cancel.
do the 20th or the 22nd, I suppose, or is 22nd Saturday? Oh, you're out?
Yeah.
6 of us here.
We can move HR one if that is full. That doesn't help because that's the day of meetings, two-day meeting of meetings. So,
How much overlap is there with finance and facilities? Are there people who are on both?
He's on both. Tim's on both. I'm on both.
Okay.
He eats his Wheaties though. Eat your Wheaties, you have energy. Whatever day.
Just pick one and we'll make it work.
What about, I know Monday mornings are,
Wednesday might be your best option, just because you need to have the time to get through some of this legwork, and it's, it's now Wednesday, so they've got to have some time as well. So Monday would be not fair, I don't
Do you
think.
guys probably want to talk more with the attorneys too on some of that?
Well, I think that I want to hear what they have to say, and then, we're talking with them as well.
Were you in on Wednesday, the 20th, John?
no,
So it's Thursday and Friday I'm out.
I'm leaving on April.
Is Wednesday, the 20th good for facilities committee people?
Not me.
Except for Sue.
Wednesday, what was the date again, sorry?
20th?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
We could bump the finance committee back to the 20th if Sue wants to come on the 19th.
So finance is on the 19th and then facilities on the 20th, right? Am I tracking?
But if you miss the facilities, you're gonna have to join finance.
Well, or like you said, you can flop them.
We can flop them and do the finance on Wednesday so that you guys can do the facilities on Tuesday.
I'll be here Tuesday, won't be.
That's fine. You want to flip flop?
19th now.
Yeah, I think so. So Tuesday becomes facilities. And Wednesday, it's finance. And Thursday is HR.
We're talking the 19th, right?
Yeah,
Like in a week.
that's the problem.
Right, in a week.
I just need to be here on the 19th and 20th, right?
Yeah.
A couple of days in my calendar when I don't have facility meeting, any of you
I
free,
will
just
not
to
be here
meet
on the
one-on-one.
20th. Jonna, did you say you were?
I'm Thursday and Friday, I'm
Are you in
meeting.
HR? Are you in that meeting?
I usually come to that, yeah.
Because I won't be here on the 21st either. Because that's supposed to be HR, right?
Right.
It's fine.
I will, yeah, I'm actually, I'm in Boone on the 21st too, but
Mimi will be there by himself.
Sorry, Mimi.
Yeah. What if there's nothing?
Or we could move it to the,
Sue and Ben and I can handle all the things.
Donna.
Yeah, we got it.
Sorry, Sue.
Otherwise, I can do the 28th if you want to move it back.
Unless you guys don't want to meet on the 21st and.
28th I will be in the most important work of the district, doing board policy committee meeting, but my policy committee members and I, you can have your other little meeting if you want to, without me.
You guys can do HR without me. I have all the trust in the world. Don't bother me. We know if the district goes downhill quick, what happened at what meeting?
Alright, that sounds good.
The next regular meeting will have a closed door at the end for you.
Okay.
For evaluation. Hopefully everybody has their stuff to give me so I can get it
Donna,
ready.
will you remember, I'm hereby requesting a
Oh,
closed
yeah,
session
yes.
April 26th.
I'll email it to you.
Email it, okay.
Ditto.
Okay. Oh crap, here we go. See, Art? Did you hear those?
Were there several that weren't done?
It's a lot of pages, I have to scan it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy I read
It's a book.
I need to keep that, or at least have it somewhere.
The other thing,
So it's the 26th that we want to do the evaluation, is that what you're saying? Okay.
April 26th, yeah. When is graduation? Because that should probably be on our calendar.
May 22nd.
May 22nd. Everybody hear that?
You'll be getting a In your forthcoming messenger, it's got graduation week, senior week, all this stuff in there. Plus, I know the high school staff will be sending email out to you with end of year information, baccalaureate, graduation, all that kind of stuff, just so you're aware.
What does that look like? Because I don't know.
So,
Yeah.
go ahead. Oh, okay, so,
I won't
we
be there
dress
for
up?
graduation. I
You
won't
won't
be
this
here.
year, okay.
And that's
So we
22nd.
dress up nice and go, it's probably like the best thing ever, a meeting, I feel like, the best meeting we ever had. Because you get to see all the kids like go across the stage.
Be on
and stuff, so it's
stage,
really cool.
present diplomas to the graduates.
Shake a hand, yeah.
But we don't wear like gowns and
No.
and stuff like that.
Wait, yeah, we do.
Yeah, if you don't still have your college gown, you'll need to order one.
It's not ever like all 7 of them.
And then,
That would be a lot.
so then if there's like so like Joey, Ryan would he'd want to give, of course, a diploma to his daughter, so he'll, like if, say Mac has
I don't
that
know, I
section
was-
of the alphabet,
I
they'll
could've
just switch in and out. So we go by what the secretary at the high school gives us for the schedule, and then we just switch in and out if we need to amongst each other.
I could have been
We don't need to make it
before.
hard for her.
I gave your last 2 there.
on stage.
Okay. And it's the 22nd, does that sound right?
22nd.
Sunday, the 22nd?
Yep, and 1 o'clock, so the board will gather kind of over by the Grist Street display in the vestibule of the field house, about 12:45. And Mr. Siebersma will give you a few directions about walking in, what you do.
And then the last thing, Sue, a workshop.
I just think it needs to be on our radar to start
So
figuring
we
out.
mentioned before, like Ted gets here, like for all of us to meet, just to discuss things. Of course, we've already heard some things.
What some of our goals are this year. I mean, of course, new superintendent doesn't come in and he's like, so are we doing the logo conversation? Are we not? Are we doing, this? But do we want to wait till, because when is he, July? When is he actually?
Yeah, July 1st is first contract day.
It's just something to think about. I feel like we haven't done any strategic planning, any goal
Rob and I-
setting. Really, where are we going? What's our priority this year? And so when he comes in, we can help guide as to, I know he's a huge part of that, obviously, but as a board, the 7 of us haven't even really talked about.
Well, he's going to ask you right away,
Lots.
when he sits
Yeah.
down with you all, what are your priorities? So,
We may want to think about a 2-hour work session to just maybe get our thoughts together about what our priorities are moving forward.
Do you guys want to do that? You guys want to plan for that at the next meeting? Figure out a date and get through April and then see if we're going to do sometime in May, early June or something. Is that okay for you?
You want to do it night or a weekend or what?
We usually do them in the evening, try to stick to a Tuesday night, at the same night as this, so that way we're not all in schedules, so whatever you guys want to do.
what typically has been done is, usually have food service put together, kind of like a little sack lunch or something, come in, 5:30, if you want time to eat and talk, and then usually try to have kind of a 6 to 8 p.m. work session. Has seemed to work pretty well in the past.
I don't know if we just want to tentatively do either the 17th, an off Tuesday that we don't have in May. I think you get into the summer and you're going to get into a baseball schedule and everything else, right? I mean, seriously, and all that. So if we wanted to plan just one of the off Tuesdays in May.
I just realized I'm gone the 17th to the 22nd.
Of May.
Yeah. For drill and AT.
All that work we just did.
You asked me to look at it. You mean all the jokes you made about me wearing a gown?
Oh, he's talking about
You're not gonna wear one?
What'd you say,
I'm gonna be in Minnesota and then
You said the
on the western.
17th.
Yeah, the 16th through the 22nd.
Your meetings are the 10th and the 24th, so maybe you can,
I'm good with the 17th, if that works.
He's gone.
Okay.
So we could do the 3rd or the 30th.
31st is that Memorial Day?
Oh.
No?
Mondays.
Yeah, it's after Memorial,
This is for,
a work session.
One of those days, either the 3rd or the 31st.
We could do May
Get
31st.
their thoughts together before they meet with Ted.
What about May 3rd? I know it's earlier, but it's just a time for us to talk
Is
about
that when it starts?
You're the 31st,
You guys
though?
can be
Hear the what?
Are you here May 31st?
Yeah, don't miss
Yeah.
those.
Does May 31st work?
It does for me. May 31st.
I'm gonna go to my son's T-ball game and then I'll be here.
Is that an earlier, you know?
I think it's at 5:15.
Okay, so we could do a 6 to 8 if we need to. Well, let's just tentatively plan for May 31st and we can figure out the time.
I don't know if rhubarb's in season by then.
it's growing.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Are you talking about the fruit?
Stems.
John is dessert.
Oh, for dessert, I'm like, what, do you got a harvest or something?
Yeah.
That's probably in June,
Rhubarb
once
be,
I
I
can
think the rhubarb might be ready
maybe
now.
cook for you
That's
guys.
what she said.
So
Did you guys have a chance to read the email that Kim
I'd like to do that.
Grissom sent us
Let's probably
today
do that
about
in
the
June, because
All right.
May's pretty iffy for me right now.
Well, I'm gonna see, I didn't get a chance to reply to her yet,
What
but
are
I
we
would
doing?
like to see
Work
what the
session.
times, if it's an all-day thing or if it's just for a portion. I don't know if anybody else had.
I haven't been on my
Share
email
with us
yet.
her response, because I'm with you. I could probably do it for like a short period of time. I can't commit.
I got it. I don't have much on my calendar these
Can I
days, so.
reply all to an email since we're in a meeting? That we all wanna know a question to?
Is it Kim Grissom's?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's,
I'll do it
it's a
real
count,
quick
yeah, it's
before
a, we'll call it a word
I
calendar
think,
thing.
I think we need
Scroll
to,
on.
whether or not Matt can send an email.
She had times on her,
Yeah.
yeah, it has times on the spreadsheet.
Oh, I didn't see there was a spreadsheet.
Yeah,
I
there's-
looked at it on my
It's
phone.
way
I
down.
apologize.
Yeah, there's 2 different days and there's different times.
Yeah.
You can just sign up in a yellow
We're
slot.
all looking at it on
I was looking at it when I
Oh.
was.
Go for far enough down.
Okay, so
Yeah, I wouldn't-
she has
I
a-
wouldn't have got it.
Okay, so she has it sectioned out now.
I don't need to reply to her.
My kid.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion made by Mac to adjourn, seconded by Brian. All those in favor say aye.
Good job.
And we're adjourned.
Slept in about.
I can't sit through